of our legislative action, so we're not going to let the issue just fade away. Hopefully, we'll be able to avoid the loss of benefits, even if it's a super inefficient use of all of our time. For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Brian Kelly.
Warning, you are about to listen to the greatest radio show ever. And due to contractual obligations and to shield our airwaves corporate licensees from any semblance of liability, responsibility, and gullibility, we must tell you the views represented on this show are not necessarily those of this station or its management. This radio show contains differing points of view on current political topics, and due to the nature of its contents, it should be heard by everyone. Thank you for listening. Now live from the heart of liberal Wisconsin, where the political party is just beginning, welcome to the Devil's Advocate Show. Best friends proving it's never personal, only politics.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Now here are your hosts, Dom and Crute.
Welcome to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. Happy Thursday, Dominic, day one of the Masters.
Happy Thursday to you, Fancy Brian, our fair audience. Thank you so much for joining us.
Dominic, we got a fine guest joining us right from the top, but let me tell you about the show briefly in the 4 o'clock Wisconsin Happy Hour. We've got the Secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Administration. Number one, the top cabinet secretary. Did somebody warn the governor that Joel Brennan would be joining us
I hope
at
Joel
4:05? Above and beyond that, we've got the Attorney General of the great state of Wisconsin, Josh Kaul. He will also join us in the 4 o'clock happy hour. But right now, from the top down, we've got Brennan Fischer. He is the Federal Reform Program Director with the Campaign Legal Center. And more importantly, we'd like to thank a friend of ours. Brennan, welcome back to the Devil's Advocates. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Brennan.
Brendan, let's talk about Ted Cruz. That's the topic, at least to start the day. If I understand this correctly, Ted Cruz used his campaign to promote his book sales, including promoting specific retailers. First and foremost, is that illegal? And secondly, how similar is that to Scott Walker's presidential campaign?
Yes, it is illegal. So one of the things that you can't do with campaign funds is personally benefit. So you cannot use campaign funds and put them in your pocket. You can't pay yourself $1 million salary. But if you are receiving royalties on a book that you authored, or at least that was authored in your name, you can't use campaign funds to promote it. And that's exactly what Ted Cruz did. He spent around $18,000 on Facebook ads that expressly promoted his book. The ad said, buy my book. They provided a link to buy the book from Amazon and Books A Million and other online booksellers. And that's a pretty clear violation of federal campaign finance law. So we filed a complaint with the Federal Election Commission. And even though the FEC is often pretty broken, this is the kind of thing that they tend to enforce. So I would not be surprised if we see some financial penalties levied against Ted Cruz.
Well, perhaps he won't be able to afford another trip to Cancun, but ultimately, isn't this what a lot of the Republicans have begun doing? And I'm only half kidding when I say Scott Walker, because during his presidential campaign, if my memory serves, he used like the 527 process. He used his super PAC and he wrote a book. And of course, he promoted the book. He'd sign the book and then sell the book at some tremendous profit through his super PAC. If you give $150, you get an autographed book.
Yeah.
Isn't that a similar workaround of the campaign finance laws? And in the very same virtue, you're selling more books.
Yeah, Unintimidated. That was Walker's book. I remember that. There are some fine lines here, and I think it is a pretty common practice for candidates to write a book, and the FEC has said that you can't use campaign funds to buy a book that you're receiving royalties on, but they created an exception where if the campaign buys the book from the publisher and the publisher agrees not to pay the candidate royalties on those purchases, then it's okay. So there's a little bit of line drawing there. I mean, there's still clearly a benefit that's coming to the candidate when the campaign buys copies of the book, even without receiving royalties, because it helps bump up book sales. It helps with the candidate's publicity and their name recognition. But that's where they drew the line. And that's where, that's why Ted Cruz's violation here is so, kind of surprising, because there's a lot of ways that he could have done something similar legally. He could have bought his own book using campaign funds, didn't receive royalties on it, and handed it out to donors, in exchange for a big contribution. But that's not what he did. he violated some pretty clear precedent that the FEC has laid down here.
The campaign finance laws have been so corrupted. I mean, really, it's kind of the Wild West. To think that he couldn't live within the constraints of the Wild West says something about the guy that is Ted Cruz.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Brennan Fischer, Federal Reform Program Director, Campaign at Legal Center. Sorry about that, Brennan. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Yep. Yeah. I mean, this is kind of par for the course with Ted Cruz. Nothing new with this guy.
Well, and it seems like money laundering to me. You know what I mean? Like if I just, write a bunch of words into a book, and I want to be clear here, there's distinctions whether or not this book can be bought by the actual campaign or through perhaps a coordinated third party, right? In which you could still receive those royalties. And I would also add, depending on how the deal is structured, the upfront money. I think Ted Cruz in this particular book deal with this conservative publisher received upwards of $400,000 as a front payment, right?
Yeah, $400,000 upfront, and then 15% royalties on every book sale. So yeah, Cruz is raking it in. That'll pay for a lot of trips to Cancun.
So does the royalty? Does he have to breach that $400,000 upfront payment with the royalties before he gets additional payments? Then is that how this is structured? Do you know?
That's my reading of it. Yeah, and Cruz disclosed this on his personal financial disclosure report filed with Senate Ethics, and that was my read of it. That he got $400,000 upfront, and then the 15% royalties went to that $400,000, and then everything above the 400 benefited. Would have gone into his pocket. But regardless, I mean, using campaign funds to promote sales of your book is unlawful, regardless of whether it's helping pay off your advance or going directly into your pocket.
Brendan, if I understood, perhaps it was the reporting of the New York Times, and you're quoted there, I believe, but the argument, the defense possibly is the fact that Cruz didn't actually exceed the 400,000 threshold, didn't sell enough books to earn any royalties, and therefore he's not self-dealing. Is that a plausible defense, sir?
No, and it's not at all clear what their defense is. And it seems like it's shifted a little bit over time. I think initially they said that that Cruz is not receiving royalties at all from book sales, and that's clearly not true. It's right there in his financial disclosure report. And then the more recent statement seems to be he's not receiving royalties on these sales, and that's impossible to believe too, because there's no real way of tracking how many people bought Cruz's book as a result of these Facebook ads. Right. So you can't possibly, so even if Cruz were to tell the publisher, don't give me royalties on the books bought as a result of my Facebook ads, that would be meaningless, because there's no possible way of tracking it.
And he was specifically linking retailers.
Yes. Yep. He was linking to Amazon, to Books A Million, to other online retailers. It might be one thing if he was telling people to buy the book directly from the publisher, because then there'd be potentially be a way of tracking it, but not when you're buying it from third parties.
Brennan, about I'm sorry, Curdy, the third party coordination, which I brought up before. And again, if you were just trying to launder money, you could coordinate with a third party organization to buy your book at whatever price. And if you sign it, you can mark it up even more. And you could put that legally, quote unquote, in your pocket, right? As a politician writing this book. But you could basically funnel money directly to the candidate through these third party organizations, with the book being the laundered piece of asset, right? Isn't that really what this comes down to? At least with the third party portion, there's no protection of the royalty like there is in the campaign.
Yeah, it's a great point. So Cruz cannot use his own campaign funds for his personal benefit. He can't buy copies of the book and then receive royalties off of those sales. But if a super PAC were to do it, if a dark money group were to do it, Even if the RNC were to do it, even if the RNC were to buy a bunch of copies of Cruz's book, he could receive royalties on those payments or on those purchases. Yeah, it's an example of just how messy the campaign finance system has gotten and how many different players there are in the system as a whole.
Brendan, as an aside, Mitch McConnell this week sort of took contradictory views on the input corporations should have in the political process. First saying corporations stay out of it, except with your checkbooks. And then later sort of pivoted and said, no, it's okay. You can still be involved in politics, because apparently he feels like that's the constitutional reading and probably got some pressure from some CEOs. What was your take on Mitch McConnell this week?
Yeah, pretty astonishing. Yeah, there were few people in politics today that have done as much as Mitch McConnell to open the floodgates to corporate money in politics. And McConnell's argument all along is that money is speech. Money needs to be treated the exact same way as speech, and corporations have a right to free speech just like anybody else. Ergo, corporations should be allowed to write $1 million checks and pour unlimited amounts of money into politics, even secretly. But now he's drawing distinctions. Now he seems to be saying, actually, corporations shouldn't speak. Corporations and CEOs should not speak if they're using words and if they're using actions. What they should be allowed to do is pour money into my pocket, into my campaign. So it's kind of the height of hypocrisy. But again, I guess what would you expect from Mitch McConnell?
Final question.
Go ahead, Curdy. Go on, man.
Well, my final question, Joe Manchin, HR1, SB1's not going to pass without a filibuster to change any of these abuses of campaign finance law. We really need change of the law, don't we, Brendan?
Yeah. I mean, right now, with the filibuster in place, you need 60 votes to get anything to pass, to get democracy reform to pass. Manchin says he supports ending dark money and protecting voting rights, but he has not yet come out and said that he would do away with the filibuster. So we're going to have to see where he goes on this.
Brennan Fischer, our fine guest, Federal Reform Program Director from the Campaign Legal Center. We'll catch up soon. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Devil's Advocates.
Thanks, Brendan.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Come back with us. More Devil's Advocates and a recruitment of Senator Ron Johnson, a surprising source. Trump has offered an early endorsement. Ron ain't even running yet. Come back. More Devils.
All right. Thanks, guys.
You're no good, baby, you're no good.
When people try to sell books, they do all sorts of interesting, exotic things.
Ted Cruz, go yourself.
If you killed Ted Cruz on the floor of the Senate and the trial was in the Senate, nobody could convict you.
Freedom! Oh, he got all of.
When you're trying to stay safe, you want the best protection possible. And when it comes to PPE, that means Lutema. Made in the USA with the highest quality materials, Lutema has mask sizes for all. Lutema masks pass ASTM Level 3 and NIOSH efficiency standards and come in a wide variety of colors and types, including M95i. Get your American-made face mask at Lutema.com. That's Lutema.com. And get 40% off your first purchase single item with promo code RADIO at Lutema.com.
The people voted to give Democrats a mandate for bold action. From COVID relief to climate change and racial injustice, the problems we're facing are large, and we need bold solutions. We can't afford more obstruction from Senator Ron Johnson and the Republicans. Text ACT to 668-366 to join Move On. Message and data rates may apply. MoveOn.org political action paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising. Poll.moveon.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
This is Dom from the Devil's Advocates. Cody and I have been doing this show for almost 10 years, and we've never had a more engaged, dialed in, and motivated audience, and we love them for it. Now is the time for you to reach the greatest audience ever. Call now and advertise with the Devil's Advocates and Devil Radio, 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM. Get your message out and let the greatest radio audience know how to support your business. Call Luke at 608-819-TALK. That's 608-819-8255. Or go to DARNWI.com.
The Devil's Advocates.
I just wanted to thank Crudy for going up to the Capitol and decorating the tree. I think it was some of your finest jackassery.
Eddie, that's a real compliment because there's quite a history of jackassery with this man.
I'm in the legal books of the state of Wisconsin. My jackassery has been enshrined for posterity. I have set precedent with my jackassery.
I think you should take it to court, though, and you should tell the judge it's a matter of law and orderment.
Political commentary from the back of the class. Warning, listening to the Devil's Advocates may expose you to opposing views.
And we are back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. You can always be part of this fine program at 844-967-2789. Make sure you check us out on the social medias, on Twitter at Devil Radio, on YouTube at the Devil's Advocates Radio, of course, on Facebook, the Devil's Advocates Radio. To some of our friends out there, Mike, yes, Ted Cruz very well may be one of the candidates for the D-bag of the day, but you're going to have to stick around till 2:50 Central to find out.
Yes, you will. Dominic, want to thank our most recent guest, a fine one. Brennan Fischer has been coming around here for a number of years now. He is the Federal Reform Program Director of the Campaign Legal Center. We like to think he's a friend of ours. And Dominic, we used to like to think that U.S. Senator Ron Johnson was a friend of ours as well. Came on the show for like 7 years, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Every 6 weeks, sometimes he brought beer, but then he kind of went full Trumpster. He kind of went full QAnon, full hydroxychloroquine, full Hunter Biden's got a dirty, crazy computer
laptop from hell
in Connecticut somewhere. And of course, Ron Johnson, he's changed. He's changed a bit. And he doesn't come around anymore. And I don't know why. It's something you did probably, Dom.
I don't know, sure. But I'm suspicious.
Yeah, I'm suspicious, Mike.
Well, here is something that will probably encourage Rojo today. He's being recruited by the Save America PAC. You know, President Donald J. Trump's little PAC, the new way of raising money. So anyways, Trump says, run, run, run. I'm going to read from the endorsement. It labels itself as an endorsement. The candidate, Senator Ron Johnson, has not declared that he is a candidate.
Maybe this will push him over the edge, Gertie.
A recruitment of sorts. Endorsement of Senator Ron Johnson. And here's what the former president says. Even though he's not yet announced that he is running, and I certainly hope he does, I'm giving my complete and total endorsement to Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. He's brave, he's bold, he loves our country, our military, and our vets, and he will protect our Second Amendment and everything else we stand for. It is the kind of courage we need in the U.S. Senate. He has no idea how popular he is. Run, run, run.
Run, Forrest, run.
Signed President Donald J. Trump. Still using the former title.
President Donald J. Trump?
Well, that's how it's signed.
But he's not the president,
well,
right?
That's sort of an honorary title one keeps for the rest of one's life, isn't it, Don?
I guess.
You still call him President Obama.
Only if you get absolute immunity. No, he's former President Obama, right?
I still call him President Obama. He's still my president. But
And
Trump
Bush?
was never
How about
hashtag
Bush?
not my
Bush,
president.
President Bush? It's just a little strange.
He is former President Bush. You know, when you're describing him, you would say former President Bush. But if I were addressing him, or if he was signing correspondence, I would not be shocked if he signed President, you know, W. Bush, something of the sort.
I prefer Maestro.
Yes. Conquistador. 844-967-2789. So this was an unexpected endorsement in my inbox. You know, I'm so glad that somehow I found my way onto the super PAC list, because God knows what I'd read in the morning if it wasn't, 9 Trump emails each and every day.
Well, he no longer has the Twitter, so he's got to do something. But seriously, the state of Wisconsin, another, battleground state, Ron Johnson's up. He hasn't declared one way or another. we see how the senator has gone much more Trumpian over the last 6 months than prior to. And as we've interviewed him over the years, Crudy, he said off air, not a big fan of the man. Sometimes those tweets, and he would qualify.
Yeah, but
his
that was
support.
like 2017, 2018 timeframe. That was before Ron took his trip to Russia for the 4th of July.
See?
And that's before Ron went all in and, of course, attacked Hunter Biden, tried to cripple the political opponent of Donald Trump. That was before the hydroxychloroquine.
Also tried to get the electoral votes of the state of Wisconsin thrown out, right?
I thought he backed off, after the insurrection.
After the riot.
Well, I got one more email from the Save America President Donald J. Trump PAC. You want to hear the other endorsement offered by Trump today?
Sure.
Statement by Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States of America. Asa Hutchinson, the lightweight rhino governor of Arkansas, just vetoed a bill that banned the chemical castration of children. Now that part's all in caps. Chemical castration of children. Now, you realize this is really a transgender bill, and it allows physicians, or would block physicians from administering and allowing the transition to happen. And the governor, I felt, was being somewhat reasonable and said, you know what? I'm going to veto this bill. Well, that raised the ire of Donald J. Trump, a man who should have been chemically castrated, about 4 kids ago. Bye-bye, Asa. That's the end of him. Fortunately for the great state of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders will do a fantastic job as your next governor.
More endorsements from the former president.
Well, she always true. So true. When she would go out and speak her truth, Dom, sort of belligerently from the podium at the press room in the White House, kind of one eye at a time. You could only really look her in one eye at a time. Similar to Scott Walker, the former governor of Wisconsin, and Marty Feldman. They all share that quality. She's going to make a fine governor. And Rojo, should he choose to run? Run.
Death, man. Do Donald Trump endorsements really even mean anything? Or is it the kiss of death?
I got to think Tom Nelson's fundraising right now, Tom Nelson being a Democratic candidate, probably Alex Lasry as well, and whoever else jumps into the U.S. Senate race to oppose Ron Johnson, I bet they're all going to be fundraising on this endorsement today. Run, says Donald J. Trump. The people, they love you, Ron. We need you. America needs you. The devil's advocates need you. Run! And dial us up at 844-967-2789. More devils on the other side.
Run.
The mood of the crowd was positive and festive.
The crowd is standing on its feet here at Augusta. The normally reserved Augusta crowd going wild.
I'm so glad you're listening to Devil Radio. It makes me so happy. Boo.
Madison businesses, stop flushing money away. If you've got old water wasting toilets in your business, Madison Water Utility will give you $100 bill credits to replace them. Madison businesses can get up to 20 bill credits per year. Save water and money by upgrading to an EPA WaterSense toilet. Madison's Water Utility Toilet Rebate Program bill credits are first come, first served until funding runs out. Find out more at madisonwater.org. Madison Water Utility customers only.
Over the years, we have done our best to bring you the highest quality products our industry has to offer. And we are very excited to bring you a new location just east of the Capitol at 951 Williamson Street. Now with 3 locations, there's an Ignite Glass and Gifts near you, no matter which side of town you're on. Madison's favorite for glass gifts and vape. Ignite Glass and Gifts, Monona Drive, Williamson Street, and Odana Road. Let's torch some glass at Ignite.
Donahue with an AP News Minute. In court today in Minneapolis in the trial of Derek Chauvin is pulmonologist Dr. Martin Tobin.
Mr. Floyd died from a low level of oxygen.
Tape from Court TV. Tobin says George Floyd was pinned to the ground, cutting off his chances to breathe.
What you're seeing is that the increase in his carbon dioxide that is found in the emergency room is solely explained by what you expect to happen in somebody who doesn't have any ventilation given to him for 9 minutes and 50 seconds.
And once George Floyd can't breathe,
the knee remains on the neck for another 3 minutes and 27 seconds after he takes his last breath.
Chauvin's attorneys are trying to say Floyd's drug use and medical history led to his death. Tobin says a healthy person would not have survived what George Floyd went through. I'm Ed Donahue.
Ad sponsored by Open Jar Concepts. Attention, this is an important message for anyone that has been diagnosed with cancer after being exposed to Roundup or other weed killers. The Internal Agency for Research on Cancer warned that overexposure to Roundup and other weed killers may increase the risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Monsanto, the manufacturer of Roundup, may have known that Roundup and other weed killers were likely linked to organ damage and cancer. This information was hidden from the public as proprietary trade secret since 1981, and Monsanto may have failed to warn of the potential risk of cancer. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with cancer after being exposed to Roundup or other weed killers, you may be entitled to significant compensation. Call us now at 800-537-2701. Our network of attorneys are ready to fight for you. You'll pay nothing unless there's a recovery in your favor. Call now for a free consultation at 800-537-2701. You must protect your legal rights. Call 800-537-2701. Again, 800-537-2701.
Stream. For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Brian Kelly with your headlines. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos said he would not support increases in DPI funding because the recently elected superintendent, Dr. Jill Underly, was supported by the Democratic Party and teachers unions. In a statement on Twitter just an hour after her election, Vos wrote, quote, "The teachers union owns the DPI, not the parents or the students or the taxpayers. Count me as someone who isn't going to support putting another nickel into this unaccountable state bureaucracy." Dr. Underly responded by saying she wanted to, quote, "help all kids no matter how their parents vote." I think it's clear from yesterday's results that supporting our local schools and our children isn't a partisan issue. There's plenty of common ground here. As I've already said, I want resources to flow to schools to help with mental health, credit recovery, staffing, and more. For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Brian Kelly.
The Devil's Advocates. Never personal, only politics.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. A big Thursday indeed, Dominic. Hey, it's the start of the Masters Golf Tournament. That's very exciting stuff, at least for me and Fancy Brian.
Yes, golf, so very exciting.
Well, that also brings all our Caddyshack references into play.
No, that's what I'm talking about.
Gunga gunga. There's that. And there's the fact that we've got big guests, especially in our 4 o'clock hour. Don, we've got Joel Brennan. He is the head of the Department of Administration. That is the top cabinet secretary here in the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin DOA Secretary Joel Brennan, 405. And the Wisconsin Attorney General got some new news out of him. He just had a press conference. He's going to join us live. Josh Kaul at 4:30 in the 4 o'clock happy hour. And Dominic, we're going to talk about the Joe Biden executive orders as well in the next hour. Hell, we're going to award a D-Bag of the Day coming up soon. But in the interim, Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin wrote an op-ed.
Everyone's favorite.
At the Washington Post. Joe Manchin III, a Democrat, represents West Virginia in the Senate. And I'm going to read from the words of Joe Manchin. The headline here, opinion, Joe Manchin, I will not vote to eliminate or weaken the filibuster, just so you know what's coming. When Americans vote to send their 2 senators to Washington, they trust that they will work to represent the interests of their state on equal footing with 98 other senators. And I have always said, if I can't go home and explain it, I can't vote for it. And I respect that each of my colleagues has the same responsibility to their constituents. It's no accident that a small state as West Virginia has the same number of senators as California or Texas. Well, it's no accident, but it might be a big mistake, but I read on. It goes to the heart of what representative government is all about. The founding fathers understood the challenges facing a rural or small state would always be very different from the more populous states. designating each state with the same number of senators, regardless of the population, ensured that rural and small states and the Americans who live in them would always have a seat at the table. You know, I'm not even sure that the founding fathers envisioned Texas or California or what 40 million people living in the same state might look like. I read on. The filibuster is a critical tool to protecting that input in our democratic form of government. That's why I've said it before, and I will say it again, to remove any shred of doubt. There is no circumstance in which I will vote to eliminate or weaken the filibuster. The time has come to end these political games and to usher a new era of bipartisanship where we can find common ground on the major policy debates facing our nation. Good luck with that. You're gonna love negotiating with Ron Johnson and Ted Cruz and Josh Kaul and all the gang. Think about the recent history. In 2013, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid led the charge to change the Senate rules to eliminate the filibuster for cabinet-level nominees and federal judges. I was one of the only 3 Democratic senators to vote against this rule change. Yeah, you were D-bag then too. In 2017, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell proposed to lower the threshold to end debate on Supreme Court nominees to a simple majority. I voted against that change too. Despite my votes, both rule changes were enacted, so they were meaningless votes then, Joe. I read on. And the filibuster was weakened, allowing the majority to more easily enact its agenda with little to no input from the minority. And every time the Senate voted to weaken the filibuster in the past decade, the political dysfunction and gridlock have grown more severe. The political games playing out in the halls of Congress only fuel the hateful rhetoric and violence we see across our country right now. The truth is, my Democratic friends do not have all the answers, and my Republican friends do not either. This has always been the case.
Crudy, I'll jump in here. Generations of senators who came before us put their heads down and their pride aside to solve complex issues facing our country. We must do the same. The issues facing our democracy today are not insurmountable if we choose to tackle them together.
But that's never going to happen, Joe.
Unfortunately, Crudy, our leaders in the Senate failed to realize what goes around comes around. We should all be alarmed at how the budget reconciliation process is being used by both parties to stifle debate around the major issues facing our country today. Legislating was never supposed to be easy. It is hard work to address the needs of both rural and urban communities in a single piece of legislation, but it is the work we were elected to do. I simply do not believe budget reconciliation should replace regular order in the Senate. How is that good for the future of this nation? Senate Democrats must avoid the temptation to abandon our Republican colleagues on important national issues. Republicans, however, have a responsibility to stop saying no and participate in finding real compromise with Democrats. Working legislation through the regular order in the Senate prevents drastic swings in federal policymaking. Voting rights reforms, instituting healthcare protections, and changes to the federal tax code and business regulations take time to implement on the state and local levels. If the filibuster is eliminated or budget reconciliation becomes the norm, a new and dangerous precedent will be set to pass sweeping partisan legislation that changes the direction of our nation every time there is a change in political control. The consequences will be profound. Our nation may never see stable governing again, as opposed to all the very stable governing we've been having. I continue on from the op-ed in the Washington Post from Senator Joe Manchin. Senators introduced bipartisan bills that seek to invest in broadband infrastructure, tax incentives, and spur manufacturing investments in rural communities, reform the Department of Veterans Affairs, protect our children from harm, and more. There is also bipartisan support for voting reform and many of the initiatives outlined in the For the People Act. Our ultimate goal should be to restore bipartisan faith in our voting process by assuring all Americans that their votes will be counted, secure, and protected. Don't fall into the trap, Joe. Efforts to expand voting hours and access, improve our election security, and increase transparency in campaign finance and advertisement rules should and do have broad bipartisan support and would quickly address the needs facing Americans today. Taking bipartisan action on voting reform will go a long way in restoring the American people's faith in Congress and our ability to deliver results for them. We will not solve our nation's problems in one Congress if we seek only partisan solutions. Instead of fixating on eliminating the filibuster or shortcutting the legislative process through budget reconciliation, it is time we do our jobs. So says Senator Joe Manchin in his op-ed. He's from West Virginia.
Dominic, I suspect Joe Manchin, much like you, has a faulty short-term memory. I mean, he's talking about the evolution and the erosion of the filibuster, but let's remember why Harry Reid felt forced and compelled to do so. Because you had obstruction on the Republican side. They weren't fair dance partners. It wasn't a fair game. It was a stacked deck, Joe. And stuff had to be done. And I'm glad that you voted against it when Mitch McConnell did it to, jam through Supreme Court justices in record time. But that, again, was Republican malfeasance, Joe. And I would take note, our fine guest a little bit later in this big show, Joe Brennan, DOA Secretary, State of Wisconsin, the article that attracted our attention, how the Wisconsin Republican Party became the party of no. Joe, face the facts. You're not naive. You've been up there a long time. You're part of that swamp. Stop acting like we're going to sing Kumbaya and get along if somehow the Democratic Party just gives up the power when we have it, when we become conciliatory, because you know what the Republican Party never did, Joe.
Well, and listen, and I even if we accept what he says as reality, which I would challenge, because his putting in his concerns about the big lie. You know, Joe, I mean, if any of those 60 plus cases were found to show fraud, to see that somehow there was some irregularities in this election, perhaps your point would be well made, but it is not. It is absolutely not. Most election experts that I have read said that this is the safest, most secure, transparent election we have ever had.
Including the Trump administration's own Department of Homeland Security.
So don't play into, we got to make sure we have, people have confidence in the system. When you have half of that party that you want to go work with, Joe, telling the country that it was not free, it was not fair, that it was stolen from Donald Trump, when you have a big chunk of those Republicans, encouraging an insurrection, encouraging the vice president to toss out the electoral votes. So what? So biased state legislatures can demand and commit to their own slate of electors. These are your willing dance partners. These are the people that are going to come to the table on any sort of these election reforms. Joe, come on, man. These are insurrectionist bastards. They're never going to play ball.
Say it with them. Kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya. 844-967-2789. Going to the phones. Our buddy from the leftist coast, LA Tom. How you doing, Tom?
Hey, Tom.
Oh, guys. First off, we the people are the government, and we must never forget that. People like Joe Manchin and all these people that want to do the whole kumbaya thing, you know what you get when you get that? You get people that say both sides are just alike. There's a reason we have elections. There's a reason why we say, this is what I'm for, this is what you're for. Then the people go out and vote for either that way or that way. But the thing is, if it's all about just getting along and all of us being great, I guess it means you drop your values at the door and you drop what it was that you actually stood for on your platform. It's insane to me, because I can just see my progressive friends saying, as an example, when they all start getting along or whatever it is, oh my God, there we go. They're all the same. They're all corporatists. They're all out for the money, which I would partly agree with because of the fact that I believe in getting money out of politics. However, we have people that have a diversity of opinion, and it doesn't. It just drives me crazy. Elections have consequences. And you know what? We've been taking those consequences, even though some of the elections have had election fraud, as our friend Greg Palast would say, but not voting fraud. That's completely different. But there's got to be a difference. There's got to be a contrast between candidates in order for people to go vote. Otherwise, they're just voting for the one that looks the best, I guess. I don't know. It's the best looking or whatever. This is just insane to me. You know what, Joe Manchin? pick a contrast to the other side of the party, or it's just, I have no idea.
Well,
I really don't.
Tom,
So
he's
frustrated.
It seems like he's very happy to be in the position that he is in. It allows him to, write these kinds of op-eds, gives him attention. But the bipartisan support for the People Act, I mean, what Republicans have come out in favor of the For the People Act? I don't remember any of them.
It's a power grab. Don, we had a quaint sentiment like that like a decade ago when we started doing this radio show. We were going to play, let's all get along, or at least let's have these conversations of equals that disagree with one another. But
and I'm still down with that, certainly.
And I think we appreciate the sentiment. If there was legitimacy behind the fact that, Republicans would play along and through our goodwill, they would somehow extend their own olive branch. But we know that that's not going to be the case. I mean, half of the House of Representatives, half of the Republicans, more than half in the House voted against the upholding of the Electoral College. I mean, that's more than half, Tom. You know it, man. You can't play nice with a bunch of crazy big lies.
This is what I'm saying. You don't negotiate with terrorists. And if you're concerned that we're going to swing this pendulum back and forth because 50% plus one, right, is going to change these policies all the time, well, fine, let's do that then. Then run on and say, yes, corporate tax rates should be lower. Absolutely. Run on the fact that, no, there shouldn't be any stimulus. Knock yourself out. Run on the fact that you don't think there should be investment in infrastructure. Okay. I mean, yes, let's do that. Let's have a Congress that can actually function, even if it functions back and forth. Oh, it takes time to implement. Sure, but every 2 years we have elections in this country. If people, can have their minds change, if new policies come forward, new candidates come forward, new messagings come out, perhaps you can convince people to go your way. But why do we put this artificial 60%, 60 votes in there? To save West Virginia? Come on, man.
West Virginia ain't worth saving. I would guess. Come back with us. More Devil's Advocates and the awarding of the D-Bag of the Day.
Love the day you left.
This is part of the resistance and the obstruction.
Tears in his eyes, I guess, as he lines up this last shot.
Would that be obstruction? Yes.
It looks like I'm a wreck. It's in the hole!
We're 1 year into the COVID pandemic, and it's clear that we can't afford more obstruction from Republicans like Senator Ron Johnson. He's twice voted against COVID relief bills that would have helped struggling Wisconsin families. We can and we must provide people the relief they need to take care of their families. Together, we can create a better future. Text ACT to 668-366 to join Move On. Message and data rates may apply. MoveOn.org. Political action paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising. Poll.moveon.org. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
Hi, this is Dom from the Devil's Advocates inviting you to join us on Patreon.com. Patreon allows for our audience to access exclusive programming not available anywhere else and gives you the ability to directly support the greatest radio show ever. History's patrons have supported the works of Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Monet, and now with your support, the Devil's Advocates. So please go to Patreon.com and search the Devil's Advocates to pick your subscription. That's Patreon.com and the Devil's Advocates, the greatest radio show ever.
Listening to the Devil's Advocates.
I just wanted to thank you for going.
The Devil's Advocates.
Darren from Madison tells us he's a former Capitol Police officer.
You can't even compare the two of what happened, yesterday and with Act 10.
Darren, did you as a Capitol Police officer ever witness any violence in the Wisconsin State Capitol?
Nope, not at all. It's about as peaceful can be when it comes to peaceful protesting. It was an unlawful assembly, but at the end of the day, there was no violence at the end of the day. It was people coming in and singing.
Listen to Devil's Advocates live weekdays from 2 to 5 p.m.
Charged, never convicted. Dom and Croat are the Devil's Advocates.
And we are back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Your input always welcome here. Toll free, talk or text us at 844-967-2789.
Dominic, I suspect this is getting to be everyone's favorite time of the day. The awarding of the D-bag of the day. But first and foremost, starts with the nominees. And, it is a broad and deep field today, Dom.
It certainly is. I mean, we've had a few already.
Well, we've got to consider Ted Cruz.
Yes.
As our friend Brennan Fischer described it, Cruz used his campaign to promote his book sales, including specific retailers, which is apparently illegal. Ted Cruz. But that seems like small potatoes in the whole scheme of things, doesn't it, Tom?
Well, I mean, what about Ron Johnson throwing out an endorsement for a candidate who has not even declared?
Well, Ron Johnson received the endorsement.
I'm
but
sorry,
the fact
President
that he
Trump,
would be
yes.
so Trumpian that he would receive the Trump endorsement. Well, you got to think that puts
unsolicited, an unsolicited Trump endorsement. I mean, how Trumpy do you got to be to get that?
Really where I thought we were going to go with this award today, though, Dom. Joe Manchin, the senator from the somewhat meaningless state of West Virginia. Sure, I know it's on the map there somewhere, but that doesn't mean it has any impact on my life. And, for the coal economy, clean coal, and all the crap we've done to satisfy the West Virginia economy and Joe Manchin, for him to come out like a D-bag and say, I oppose the erosion of the filibuster anymore, which means effectively he doesn't believe in HR1 and SB1 because there is really no other feasible means to passage.
No, there's bipartisan support for the People Act.
You're never
But
going to
if you
get
Google it,
bipartisan
you're
support.
going to find certainly Republican citizens in this country. A majority of them are down for it, like 59%, something like that.
Well, as Joe Biden would say, isn't that bipartisan support?
if the people are for it, not their elected representatives. But if none of the Republicans are down with it, how the hell are you going to get anything like that done?
Well, I'm not at all clear. And it seems a pretty D-baggish op-ed published at the Washington Post.
Is he it then? Are we making this?
No. It's close. And one more thought.
Oh, okay.
Wayne LaPierre from the NRA. I mean, how we haven't awarded him the D-bag yet?
No, I totally forgot about that.
He's got to go hide post Newtown shootings. He's got to go hide on a 108-foot yacht for his own personal safety. And the NRA also had to buy him a $6.5 million mansion, of course, again, for his own personal safety.
Yes.
And they also apparently had to eradicate mosquitoes on his behalf for his personal safety.
The NRA does care.
And I would just ask him, why didn't you just get out the AR-15? Isn't that to protect you?
Right.
Isn't that for your personal safety?
Yes.
Aren't you literally, by your own definition, that good guy with a gun?
But I think also he did not disclose these particular jaunts on this 100+ foot yacht to the bankruptcy court. He was a little late in coming. He kind of, forgot about it or something.
Wayne LaPierre didn't even tell the NRA that he was putting the organization into bankruptcy.
Well, you got to protect yourself from the lawsuits in New York, man. I mean, how else are you going to get cover?
Well, you still got to tell somebody, right? Someone other than the
know.
courts. Anyways, that seems pretty D-baggish.
He didn't tell them for his own safety.
But Dominic, I think we've got the ultimate D-bag. The wingman, the former wingman, perhaps. News breaking today that Joel Greenberg, the tax collector guy, got himself a badge and body armor and a gun and some fake IDs and some sugar babies around the state, some of whom may even have been underage females. And apparently he had a buddy, Matt Gaetz. And, they like to take vacations down to the Bahamas with ganjapreneur types, hand surgeons, diversifying, if you will. But the wingman, apparently, according to his attorney, Dom, the wingman's going to turn state's evidence, which, of course, is bad news for Matt Gaetz. And I certainly take some glee in the bad news for Matt Gaetz. But the wingman, that's kind of a D-bag move, isn't it, Dom?
Oh, right. What about the bro code wingman? And you're described as the wingman and you flip. I mean, you got to imagine a guy like Trump would not appreciate that whatsoever.
Well, Trump appreciated loyalty. much like I do. I expect loyalty. I demand loyalty from my wingman. Dom, if you were ever under federal indictment, again, no, as far as I know, never federal indictment.
No.
But
charged, never convicted.
I would expect you to do the time and keep your yap shut and keep my name, keep your mouth off of my name. Because that's what a wingman does.
Not this guy, Joel Greenberg. Here's briefly here from the Washington Post. An associate of Rep. Matt Gaetz, who had been charged with sex trafficking of a minor and was suspected of connecting the congressman to women with whom he could have sex, is in plea negotiations to resolve allegations against him, according to his lawyer and a prosecutor in the case. A potentially ominous sign for Gaetz if the associate ultimately cooperates with prosecutors in a bid for leniency.
Well, it may keep his ass out of prison, Dom, but that's an awfully D-baggish move.
At a status conference in the case on Thursday, federal prosecutor Roger Handberg told a judge he expected the case to end in a plea, though negotiations are ongoing. Fritz Scheller, an attorney for Greenberg, asked the judge to set a deadline of May 15 for the two sides to either reach a deal or move toward a trial in the summer.
It'd be different if Greenberg, perhaps was stricken in his moral conscience by the behaviors of Matt Gaetz. Be different if he was the good guy in this scenario, but he was supplying the underage girls. He was partying. He was at the orgies, right?
They shared a girlfriend, Crudy.
Cinderella boy.
Shared a girlfriend. I'm just saying, any two grown men that have ever attended an orgy together, there's a code, right, Tom? There's a code.
Yes, there's definitely a code. Come on, Joel Greenberg, I believe. Crudy, do we agree on this? We concur.
I concur, wingman.
You can be my wingman anytime. Joel Greenberg is our D-bag of the day.
D-bag of the day.
Come back. Hour 2 of the Devil's Advocates is next. We'll talk about the proposition. Joe Biden going all executive action. He's got to take your guns. We'll see. We'll talk about that.
Didn't Obama already take the guns?
I thought Hillary Clinton had your guns.
I'm so confused. Who took all the guns?
She hit them in the Ukraine with her server.
Yeah.
She's wiping them down with a cloth.
With a cloth?
Come back with us. Hour 2 is next. Oh, this is hour 2. What hour are we in? No, hour 2 is next. I feel pretty confident.
Wow, dude.
And your phone calls always welcome here. 844-967-2789. I would remind you, charged, never convicted. Much.
This crowd has gone deadly silent. Cinderella story, out of nowhere. A former greenskeeper now about to become the Masters champion.
You can be my wingman anytime. Well, you can be mine.
It looks like I'm a wreck.
Wisconsin is stimulated. More than $5 billion in COVID-19 aid. That's more than $3,000 in the bank account of the average Wisconsin household right now. For the WBA. Let Devil Radio help your company benefit from the expected leap in consumer spending. Advertise here and reach our engaged local and statewide audiences while getting the exceptional value of our pandemic ad pricing. Ending soon. Go online at devilradio927.com today to get started.
This is Dom from the Devil's Advocates. Cody and I have been doing this show for almost 10 years. We've never had a more engaged, dialed in, and motivated audience, and we love them more. Now is the time for you to reach the greatest audience ever. Call now and advertise with the Devil's Advocates and Devil Radio, 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM. Get your message out and let the greatest radio audience know how to support your business. Call Luke at 608-819-TALK. That's 608-819-8255. Or go to darnwi.com. You are listening to WTTN Columbus, W224EG Madison, always streaming at DevilRadio927.com.
AP News. I'm Ed Donahue. At Derek Chauvin's murder trial in Minneapolis, pulmonologist Dr. Martin Tobin went over the timeline of when Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck.
The level of oxygen has gone down to zero. That there is, at that point, there's not an ounce of oxygen left in his body.
Tobin testified Chauvin's knee was virtually on the neck for more than 90% of the time. He also rejected the defense theory that Floyd's drug use and underlying health problems were what killed him.
A healthy person subjected to what Mr. Floyd was subjected to would have died as a result of what he was subjected to.
Defense attorney Eric Nelson argued that the now fired white officer did what he was trained to do, and George Floyd's death was caused by illegal drugs and underlying medical problems. President Biden says he's taking executive action to try to stop gun violence.
This is an epidemic, for God's sake, and it has to stop.
The actions include tightening regulations for buyers of ghost guns, homemade firearms that usually are assembled from parts.
For God's sake. I'm going to use all the resources at my disposal as president to keep the American safe from gun violence. But there's much more that Congress can do to help that effort. And they can do it right now.
There was another mass shooting
I know, I
in
think
South
we-
Carolina. Five
we just
people, including a
giggle for a
prominent
minute,
doctor, were
talk
shot
about
and
the fact
killed.
we're gonna
Sheriff
get
Kevin
Joe
Tolson says the
Biden's
gunman later killed
proposition.
himself.
Of
Former
course, let's give
NFL
our
player
audience an
Philip
opportunity
Adams.
to
We have
respond to
probably more
the
questions.
greatness that we offer them each and every day here on the radio.
We are working
I
hard
mean,
to provide.
we get blood, sweat, and tears just so you can blow out the whole
Reserve
lot of
Chair
your
Jerome
nose.
Powell says the economy is headed toward a strong recovery, though he cautioned not all will immediately benefit. He cited quickening vaccinations and signs of rapid hiring. This is AP News.
And sponsored by Open Jar Concepts. Attention, this is an important message for anyone that has been diagnosed with cancer after being exposed to Roundup or other weed killers. The Internal Agency for Research on Cancer warned that overexposure to Roundup and other weed killers may increase the risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Monsanto, the manufacturer of Roundup, may have known that Roundup and other weed killers were likely linked to organ damage and cancer. This information was hidden from the public as proprietary trade secret since 1981, and Monsanto may have failed to warn of the potential risk of cancer. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with cancer after being exposed to Roundup or other weed killers, you
What
may
are
be entitled
horse
to
shoes?
significant
Are there any
compensation.
horse
Call us
socks?
now at 800-537-2701. Our network of attorneys are ready to fight for you. You'll need nothing unless there's a recovery in your favor. Call now for a free consultation at 800-537-2701. You must protect your legal rights. Call 800-537-2701. Again, 800-537-2701.
Because that pivots to Joe.
March of the
Doing executive orders.
Stop flushing.
You also got
money
4
away.
callers.
Replace your old water
Oh,
wasting
okay.
toilet, and
I
Madison
don't know.
Water Utility will give
Gotcha.
you a $100 bill credit. Madison Water
I'm
Utility is
I'm
popular
I'm
toilet rebate
disconcerted
programs back for
because
2021.
my phone
Save more than
computer
1 billion
is
gallons
now
of
over
water
here.
just by getting rid of old
So I'm
toilets.
also reminding
Get
me
your $100
we
credit
have
by
callers.
upgrading to an EPA WaterSense model. Bill credits are first come, first serve until funding runs out. Find out more at madisonwater.org. Madison Water Utility customers only.
The people voted to give Democrats a mandate for bold action.
Rumor and
From COVID
speculation.
relief to climate change and racial injustice. The problems we're facing are large, and we need bold solutions. We can't afford more obstruction from Senator Ron Johnson and the Republicans. Text ACT to 668-366 to join Move On. Message and data rates may apply. MoveOn.org political action paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising. Poll.moveon.org. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
Stream Progressive News and Talk 24/7, as well as download exclusive podcasts and interviews at devilradio927.com. That's devilradio927.com.
We should have it.
Hi, this is Dom from the Devil's Advocates inviting you to join us on Patreon.com. Patreon allows for our audience to access exclusive programming not available anywhere else and gives you the ability to directly support the greatest radio show ever. History's patrons have supported the works of Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Monet, and now with your support, the Devil's Advocates. So please go to Patreon.com and search the Devil's Advocates to pick your subscription. That's Patreon.com and the Devil's Advocates, the greatest radio show ever.
Whoever you are.
Wash your hands, avoid sick people, and touching your face. There are everyday
I'll
actions
never
to help
forget
prevent
what's
the
her name.
spread of respiratory diseases. Visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. Brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM. I'm Brian Kelly with your headlines. President Biden has rescinded Trump's permission for Michigan and Wisconsin to impose work restrictions on Medicaid recipients. Biden's Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services wrote to Michigan and Wisconsin saying the mandate did not align with Medicaid's goal of helping low-income populations. The CMS also pointed out that most Medicaid recipients either do work or are exempt from work due to illness or disability. So this policy applied to few people. The Supreme Court was supposed to hear arguments on Medicaid work requirements last month, but stopped once it was clear Biden was canceling the policy. Today, cloudy and cooler with showers, high of 60. Tonight, cloudy and mild showers, low of 48. Tomorrow, more showers, high of 56. For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Brian Kelly.
Warning, you are about to listen to the greatest radio show ever. And due to contractual obligations and to shield our airwaves' corporate licensees from any semblance of liability, responsibility, and gullibility, we must tell you the views represented on this show are not necessarily those of this station or its management. This radio show contains differing points of view on current political topics, and due to the nature of its contents, it should be heard by everyone. Thank you for listening.
Forget it for half an hour.
Now live from the heart of liberal Wisconsin, where the political party is just beginning. Welcome to the Devil's Advocate Show. Best friends proving it's never personal, only politics.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Now here are your hosts, Dom and Crute.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. Happy Thursday. Happy day one of the Masters Golf Tournament. Apparently, they're not boycotting Georgia, Dom. They used to be a whites-only club, if you don't recall.
And a men's-only club until very recently.
Yes.
Yeah, but the flowers are really pretty.
They are. The azaleas. They're beautiful. Amen, Carter.
Come on, man.
I like golf. You know, it's been a while. I used to be much more committed to my golf game.
Yeah, I have clubs.
Until I started doing a radio show with you. So I blame you. When I shake it, it's your fault. Dominic!
You're welcome.
You know, I've often thought of becoming a golf club.
That's all I need, Danny.
You know, Dominic, we're going to our callers. They've been very patient at 844-967-2789. And topically, we're going to talk more about Wayne LaPierre, a nominee for D-Bag of the Day. And I got to tell you, our crack research team, they're up each day at the crack of dawn, gathering nominees for that big award. And I mean, it's grown to be a big part of this show. People love the D-Bag of the Day, the awarding of that tremendous honor. But Wayne LaPierre deserves more of our attention.
Yes, just a little bit.
And then the pivot to the president and his executive order, especially on the ghost guns. We'll talk about that as well with our audience, and you can be a part of it at 844-967-2789. Go to the phones. And our pal Betsy, hopefully not going all full Betsy on us. Welcome back.
Hey, Betsy.
Hey, guys. I've been listening. Don't worry. I am totally devoted to it.
I hear this show is some days a good listen, Betsy.
Yes, it's excellent. You guys are just fantastic. Everything.
Tell us more. No, please.
Yeah.
We accept all your many compliments. Let's talk politics. What do you got for us?
Well, one of my friends just came in and said that Biden's going after the cash. They're going to eliminate cash.
Eliminate cash?
Yeah.
Like no more currency? Like my money's no good here?
Like they did in India where you hand in all your cash and you get a debit card and stuff. This is the new propaganda going around, I think.
Well, it must be. I'm pretty sure it would have hit my phone by now. Someone would have broken that as a headline if Biden proposed eliminating cash.
No more cash. It's all Bitcoin now, Betsy? No, I have not heard that either.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably coming down the pipe here because all these conspiracy theories. But this guy's pretty smart, and he told me and was like, I freaked out just like he did.
Betsy, if there's no cash, how do you go to the pizza parlor where the pedophiles eat the children in the basement and buy your Brooklyn style.
I just don't see how that can happen in this country of ours.
We're not getting rid of the cash yet.
Not yet, but it might be down 50 years from now. Who knows? I don't know.
Sure, absolutely. I think we'll move into the direction of a cashless society. But in the meantime, if we could just get rid of a few of these Republicans. Betsy, appreciate you listening. We're going to keep moving down the phones. 844-967-2789. One small piece of advice for Betsy. Don't take any wooden nickels. Jack from Merrimack, you're next. What do you got for us, Jack?
Hey, Jack.
Oh, yeah, I got my favorite guy, Joe Manchin. And Manchin is a real piece of work. This guy says, oh, yeah, we've got to have bipartisan support for this, that, and the other. No. What he's doing in opposing the filibuster, he's able to say to his donors, that, well, notice that piece of legislation just didn't go through. And, of course, to his constituents, he can say, well, gee, I would have certainly voted for that popular piece of legislation, but, 60 votes. So he's really playing.
So you think it allows him to, stay insulated from taking some difficult votes, Jack?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Jack, you noticed in the op-ed that we read from Joe Manchin, he effectively referenced the prior insulated votes he made in each circumstance where the filibuster was eroded prior. Well, I was on the correct side of history, according to me. But of course, his vote was insulated. It was not the determinative vote. He really didn't move history. But right now, he's threatening the rest of us. We are negotiating with Joe Manchin. He's the terrorist.
Yeah, you got that right. And I think what it's probably going to take is 2022 and get maybe 3-4 more Democrats into the Senate. The Senate is the most anti-democratic body we have in this.
The deliberative U.S. Senate.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
They're much better than the rabble over there in the House of Representatives.
Well, yes, the deliberative Senate that allows for a filibuster without deliberating, without pontificating, without speaking, Jack. That's how deliberative they have become.
Well, and 52 senators represent a grand total of 18% of our population. The 50 Democrats represent 41 million more people than the 50 Republicans, and yet we can't get anything through that Senate because of so-called Democrats like Manchin. I'd put him up for dirtbag any day unless he changes his tune vastly.
Jack, appreciate your contribution. Technically, D-bag stands for something other than dirt.
But thank you for your suggestions.
844-967-2789. Andy from Beaver Dam, another friend. Join us, Andy. What do you got?
Hey, Andy.
Well, I've got two things. Inquisitive minds want to know, who's the excited lady on your ad, or do we know who that is?
That's the Wisconsin nymphomaniac.
Oh, okay.
What? I don't remember recording anything.
Wisconsin is stimulated.
Oh, yeah.
That's
a drop from Family Guy. That's Marge.
Oh, okay.
Oh, God.
That's right. No, I don't watch that, but yeah, that makes sense. The other thing is to close the book on the 13th Senate District. Happy Face John Jagler won, of course, and Winker lost by 2,782 votes. And our old Trumper boy here, Spencer Zimmerman, managed to muster 1,700 votes.
Yeah.
So
that was not the margin of victory. The margin of victory was Republican turnout in the 13th. And obviously it's a gerrymandered district, but really it was a contest of turning one's own out, and the Republicans did it more effectively than the Democratic Party did. And I guess that was the expected turnout, Andy. But for a guy that lives up there in the 13th and a guy who's got a radio station that covers big portions, like the entirety of the 13th, it was awfully disappointing to see them effectively concede the airwaves. They never even tried getting the base out by utilizing 1580 AM and Devil Radio.
Right. They should have. The Democrats should have bought some more time on you
Bought
guys.
any time. But, you know,
More than anything.
that's easy for me to say. I'm a business guy. I want them to, you know, put the ads here. But as a political guy, Andy, that's where I really get galled. You know, because quite frankly, I didn't budget any political money. It was a spring election. I didn't think we were going to get paid. You know, we got a few bucks from Joe Biden in the fall. I'm not going to say the cupboard's full forever, but, you know, I didn't expect any windfall from a spring election in the state of Wisconsin. But I wanted to see a contested contest. And Andy, I know that Winker worked very, very hard. I saw her out there campaigning constantly on social media. You know, that's how you do it now. You go out to knock doors, you take a picture of yourself, you say, here's what I'm doing. Please give me your vote. And she did everything that could be expected of a candidate, you know, except win perhaps. And that would have taken resources beyond her control. That would have taken you know, 50 grand of radio ads. I don't even think it would be an astronomical number. You know, and I'm not talking just my radio station, but I'm talking in talks with an ad buyer for a store in Portage. And I did the radio locator in Portage, Andy, and I looked for all the news talk radio stations in Portage. And you know how many there are you can hear in Portage? One. And one out of Milwaukee. And I can't imagine buying ads in Milwaukee to try and influence the outcomes in Portage. We are your backyard news talk radio station, Andy, as you well know.
Yeah, comes in like a bell.
Well, tell somebody.
Tell them all, Andy.
Especially someone up at the Democratic Party, if you know anyone. Appreciate the call, fella. 844-967-2789. Mark from the Sack, welcome back. How are you, Mark?
Hey, Mark.
I'm doing okay. I got my Pfizer shot yesterday, so
nice.
Glad to get that. But I mean, I give Mr. Manchin a little history lesson. The founders probably wouldn't even envision West Virginia existing because that was a split off during the Civil War when West Virginia opposed slavery and opposed disunion from the Union.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little history lesson for him. And how many Republicans would support giving medical care to his constituents to get black lung or get poisoned by the water that the coal companies are dumping in, the poisons that the coal companies are dumping into the water these days under the loosened Trump regulations. And Donald Trump would show no loyalty to anybody. Donald Trump would flip on anybody for a dime, literally for a dime. So that's what Trump's loyalty would do for anybody. So don't trust that guy.
Well, certainly I wouldn't be his wingman, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate your call. Dom, I also scheduled my first Pfizer shot next Wednesday.
Excellent.
Went pretty smoothly. We'll see when I get the shot. You've had it both, right?
Yeah.
Was that the Pfizer or Moderna?
Pfizer. Both shots were Pfizer, yes.
Well, we'll find out if it works better in my arm or yours. Come back with us. More Devil's Advocates, my radio or yours. 844-967-2789. Join us.
There's a lot of badness.
Gunga, galunga. Gunga, gunga, la gunga.
Eric Holder, he's the former U.S. Attorney General and current chair of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee.
Moved it to now.
Scott Walker is saying that we are doing something to push partisan gerrymandering. That is the
He was ready, and I was like,
total
I'm gonna get to it.
I mean,
I'm
that's
gonna have to switch it
absurd.
out.
He
I'm gonna
is
know
the
that.
architect of among the most gerrymandered states in the union. All we're pushing for is a fair process come 2021.
Listen to the Devil's Advocates live weekdays from 3 to 6 p.m.
We're 1 year into the COVID
No, I have
pandemic, and
short
it's
dick,
clear
man.
that we can't afford more obstruction from Republicans like Senator Ron Johnson. He's twice
Don't
voted
need
against
no
COVID relief
short
bills that
man.
would have helped struggling Wisconsin families. We can and we must provide people the relief
That
they
could be
need to
for
take care of
literally
their
any
families.
Republican.
Together, we can create a better future. Text ACT to 668-366 to join Move On. Message and data rates may apply. MoveOn.org. Political action paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising. Poll.moveon.org. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
This is Dom from the Devil's Advocates. Cody and I have been doing this show for almost 10 years, and we've never had a more engaged, dialed in, and motivated audience, and we love them for it. Now is the time for you to reach the greatest audience ever. Call now and advertise with the Devil's Advocates and Devil Radio, 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM. Get your message out and let the greatest radio audience know how to support your business. Call Luke at 608-819-TALK. That's 608-819-8255. Or go to darnwi.com.
The Devil's Advocates.
There are lots of people that haven't made up their mind on this race, and you think, how could that be? No, there are. There are a lot of people that could still make a decision all the way on election day down.
Undecided voters are the biggest idiots on the planet. Try giving short, simple answers.
Like you'll go person, woman, man, camera, TV. Yosemite's.
Because freedom.
Oh, get your towels ready, it's about to go down. Everybody in the place hit the open deck, but stay on your mother toes. We running this, let's go. I'm on a boat, everybody.
I don't know if you know the Devil's Advocates, but they are kind of a big deal.
And we are back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Phone lines open for you. Toll-free talk or text at 844-967-2789.
Dominic, it's been some number of years since Kuchka invited me on his yacht.
It's been a while, man.
We wanted to throw this article out there, and then we'll get to the phones at 844-967-2789. NRA Chief Wayne LaPierre acknowledges he did not disclose bankruptcy plans or luxury yacht trips to other top officials.
What?
Tom Hamburger over at the Washington Post. I bet he's delicious, Tom. Let me read. Wayne LaPierre, who positioned the National Rifle Association as an uncompromising lobbying powerhouse over the last 3 decades, admitted Wednesday that he did not disclose free trips he took on a luxury yacht. Wayne LaPierre went on a boat, right, Tom? And acknowledged that some top NRA officials were not informed in advance of his plan to seek bankruptcy protection for the group. I didn't think I'd tell you. I'd send a memo out on Thursday. Under questioning on the 3rd day of the federal bankruptcy hearing, LaPierre defended his leadership of the gun rights group and the benefits he and his family received from NRA contractors. But his testimony undercut arguments by NRA lawyers this week that LaPierre has effectively cleaned up ethical and governance problems since 2018,
right,
when the organization was first alerted by New York State officials of possible fiscal mismanagement. Well, that's the worst sort of mismanagement, Tom. Last year, New York Attorney General Letitia James sued the NRA, alleging that LaPierre and 3 other top officials used the group's resources for their own personal benefit. Sort of a slush fund, a piggy bank, if you would. She has sought to dissolve the organization. In testimony Wednesday, LaPierre acknowledged, as other NRA officials had previously, that the full board and general counsel were not informed in advance of the bankruptcy plan. And he expressed regret for not disclosing internally the free trips he accepted on a yacht owned by David McKenzie, a California film producer who's linked to firms that the Attorney General's office has alleged received tens of millions of dollars in contracts over the years from the NRA. You know, one hand washes the other, right, Tom?
They both wash it a face.
And they both go on a yacht. Here's a quote. I believe it was one of the mistakes I made in not listing that on the NRA conflict of interest.
And I regret that.
LaPierre said, I mean, it sounds a lot like Jared Kushner. He said the yacht trips were necessary for business reasons. I'd like to do the rest of my business trips and, you know, really all relationships on a boat from here on out. He said the yacht trips were necessary for business reasons and because they provided a safe retreat from the physical threats he received in the wake of mass shootings. LaPierre acknowledged under questioning that he had not filled out the NRA conflict of interest disclosure forms for several years. He finally did so last week. This week, my bad. Not last week, this week. According to a document submitted as part of the hearing. And even before the 71-year-old NRA chief appeared on the stand, his actions had been at the center stage from the opening moments of the hearing, which will determine whether the gun rights group is permitted to seek bankruptcy protection, Dom.
Crudy, the New York Attorney General's office has argued that LaPierre improperly steered the organizations toward bankruptcy as a way to avoid the far-reaching lawsuit it filed last year.
You don't say.
The suit prompted the NRA to announce plans to move from New York, where it has been chartered since 1871, to Texas. The organization also moved to seek bankruptcy protection, saying its finances were sound, but that the action was necessary to protect itself from what officials characterized as a politically motivated investigation.
I'm not sure. Is that good cause under the bankruptcy codes of the United States? No, we've got money, but we want to declare bankruptcy and not pay our vendors because they're very political.
We filed this bankruptcy to look for a fair legal playing field where the NRA could grow and prosper, as opposed to what we believe had become a toxic, politicized, weaponized government in New York State, LaPierre said in response to questions from James Sheehan, chief of Charities Bureau in the New York Attorney General office.
Because they had been sued in New York, and the Attorney General sought to dissolve the organization due to the NRA director's mismanagement and taking a massive gifts of compensation, like trips on a yacht.
No, that's all political, Crudy. LaPierre confirmed he used the phrase "dump New York" in news release, describing the impetus for the bankruptcy filing. Lawyers for James argued that it was the actions of NRA officials that have jeopardized the organization. Quote, "If the NRA faces an existential crisis by the bankruptcy, it was a crisis brought on by LaPierre and his enablers and by their choices," said Monica Connell, an assistant New York Attorney General, arguing that LaPierre concealed the bankruptcy plan from the NRA board and other top officials until after the bankruptcy petition was filed in January. The New York investigation began in 2019 as internal conflicts about the NRA's spending burst dramatically into public view. The group's president, Oliver North, remember that guy, was pushed out after he said he tried to raise alarms about the organization's spending. He was followed by the NRA's top lobbyist, Chris Cox, among other officials.
When they hired Oliver North, they thought he'd understand when they did a few shreddings late at night around the office.
You got to figure that's kind of the mentality that they want.
Did they have
the top of the NRA, right? You gotta have a guy that knows how to, work a 55-gallon drum and burn some documents. You know what I'm saying?
I do. So, trips on a yacht, Dom.
Hey, it's all for business. I had to do this. And also, he also went to the Bahamas with these folks too. Stayed as a guest of Mackenzie at Bahamas Resort, where he was doing business with potential celebrity donors.
Isn't that Matt Gaetz' excuse? Didn't he go to the Bahamas to do a little commerce, if you know what I'm saying? Come back with us. More Devil's Advocates. The phone line's open, 844-967-2789. We're going to take a little break to the corporate yacht.
It's easy to grin when your ship comes in and you've got the stock market beat. But the man worthwhile is the man who can smile when his shorts are too tight in the seat.
Okay, Pookie. The NRA does care.
Hey, you scratched my ankle.
Talk radio made for the 99%. Only on 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, Wisconsin's home for Devil Radio.
Wisconsin is stimulated. More than $5 billion in COVID-19 aid. That's more than $3,000 in the bank account of the average Wisconsin household right now. For the WBA. Let Devil Radio help your company benefit from the expected leap in consumer spending. Advertise here and reach our engaged local and statewide audiences while getting the exceptional value of our pandemic ad pricing. Ending soon. Go online at devilradio927.com today to get started.
Oh, crap.
Hey, Rocker, I heard you have a rye whiskey.
I do, Jimmy. Rocker Rye Whiskey. The mash is a high rye with a touch of malted barley that makes it yummy.
And Rocker Rye Whiskey is dedicated to the Madison music scene?
It sure is, Jimmy. You can read the story on the back of the bottle at any of these fine locations. Star Liquor, Woodman's, Trixie's Liquor, Vic Pierce, Miller & Sons in Verona, Steve's Liquor, Total Wine, and enjoy Rocker Rye Whiskey at the Lazy Oaf Lounge and Sal's Dark Horse. Find out more at rockervodka.com.
I'm Ed Donahue with an AP News Minute. Stocks finished higher. The Dow up 56 points. The S&P 500 hit a new record. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is going to court.
We're filing a lawsuit against the federal government and the CDC demanding that our cruise ships be reopened immediately.
DeSantis says the no-sail order is outdated and hurts the state.
We don't believe the federal government has the right to mothball a major industry for over a year. Based on very little evidence and very little data.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says the economy is headed toward a strong recovery, though he cautions not all will immediately benefit.
There will be millions of people who have a hard time finding their way back into the workforce and recovering the lives that they had just a year ago. And, I think it would be appropriate for us to continue to support those people.
The government says the number of people filing for unemployment rose last week. I'm Ed Donahue.
Ad sponsored by Open Jar Concepts. Attention, this is an important message for anyone that has been diagnosed with cancer after being exposed to Roundup or other weed killers. The Internal Agency for Research on Cancer warned that overexposure to Roundup and other weed killers may increase the risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Monsanto, the manufacturer of Roundup, may have known that Roundup and other weed killers were likely linked to organ damage and cancer. This information was hidden from the public as proprietary trade secret since 1981, and Monsanto may have failed to warn of the potential risk of cancer. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with cancer after being exposed to Roundup or other weed killers, you may be entitled to significant compensation. Call us now at 800-537-2701. Our network of attorneys are ready to fight for you. You'll pay nothing unless there's a recovery in your favor. Call now for a free consultation at 800-537-2701. You must protect your legal rights. Call 800-537-2701. Again, 800-537-2701.
For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Brian Kelly with your headlines. Governor Tony Evers announced Tuesday that the state would disperse more than $46 million through the We're All In grant program. More than 9,000 Wisconsin businesses are expected to receive $5,000 grants to help them weather the pandemic. Over 3 phases, the program infused about $240 million into Wisconsin businesses. Funding for the program will come from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, a federal stimulus package from March of 2020. Evers has other stimulus plans for the state and plans to use the funds provided by the recently passed American Rescue Plan to help more Wisconsin businesses. For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Brian Kelly.
Of the time, they're right every time. Tom and Cruz are the Devil's Advocates.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Sorry about that. Well, McClem, talk amongst yourselves.
Okay, actually clearing your throat, not just like wondering if this is the actual Devil's Advocates radio show.
Well, it is the Devil's Advocates radio show. That I assure you. Greatest radio show ever.
Well, at least you didn't go Webster's. At least you didn't say the greatest radio show ever. You could, interpret that wrong.
I don't think anyone misinterprets how great we think this radio show is. And Betsy also likes us. And hopefully you do as well. You can join us here at 844-967-2789. Tomorrow, being joined on the big show by Liz Winstead. What is her current organization? She was Lady Parts Justice. She's the creator of The Daily Show, fine comedian. She's been on our program, but it's been some period of time. Do you know what her?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't have it.
She's just coming as a super cool guy.
She's coming. Yeah, it's just been a while. We love ourselves some Liz, and we're gonna have a good time with her.
About 24 hours from now, and for those of you sticking around for the happier Wisconsin Happy Hour, 406 Joel Brennan, Secretary, the Wisconsin Department of Administration. That's Tony Evers, #1 cabinet secretary. I hope he's not a late cancel. And Josh Kaul, the attorney general, great state of Wisconsin. Josh seems to like us, so I feel pretty confident he'll keep his appointed rounds. I booked Josh. And a little bit more, Dominic, the president of the United States, Joe Biden, today, through executive action, came out and did some stuff. And we want to share some of the Biden sound with you, our fair audience. Fancy Brian, going to need your help. Dick on the phone is going to need your patience. 844-967-2789. If you are a little patient, we'll get to you soon. But let's do the Joe Biden from earlier today. Guns, an epidemic and an embarrassment. Cut number 30, please.
Gun violence in this country is an epidemic. Let me say it again. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic, and it's an international embarrassment.
It is. I mean, and I think that's I don't want to downplay that at all. I think it's a very poignant statement from the president of the United States. I mean, you think about how other countries look at us. You know what I'm saying? As these gun-toting Americans, it is an embarrassment how much murder we have going on. How many hundreds of people are shot every single day in this country?
You know, Joe, I got to say, and you, Dom, it's a little late now to worry about the United States' bad reputation. We freaking elected Donald Trump. Wow. I mean, it's kind of in the gutter right now.
Every day is another day for redemption, Michael.
More of the new guy, President Joe Biden, talking about guns, cut 31.
If I get one thing on my list, the Lord came down and said, Joe, you get one of these, give me that one. Because I tell you what, there would be a come to the Lord moment these folks would have real quickly.
A come to Jesus moment. More of the president, Joe Biden, it's time for action, cut 32.
They've offered plenty of thoughts and prayers, members of Congress, but they passed not a single new federal law to reduce gun violence. Enough prayers. Time for some action.
Well, executive action at minimum. There is legislative action that could be proposed and passed, but, you know, Joe Manchin would probably turn it into a campaign ad and shoot that legislation dead on a tree like he did to the ACA. More of Joe Biden, a National Firearms Act, cut 33.
These modifications to firearms that make them more lethal should be subject to the National Firearms Act.
Yes. Talking about ghost guns, guns that are assembled as parts, and then they become almost untraceable because the parts aren't connected through, you know, effectively VIN numbers or serial numbers. You can't trace the source of the gun to the perpetrator. More from Joe Biden. Turn pain into purpose, cut 34.
To turn pain into purpose and demand that we take the action that gives meaning to the word enough. Enough, enough, enough.
Now, I hadn't heard the term ghost guns much until very recently, but apparently Joe Biden's going to be your ghost gun buster. Played for the people, cut 35.
I want to see these kits treated as firearms under the Gun Control Act, which is going to require that the seller and manufacturers make the key parts with serial numbers and run background checks on the buyers.
Joe Biden, ghost guns, referring to an epidemic. Let's keep going on this. The president, cut 36, please.
This is an epidemic, for God's sake, and it has to stop.
Also proposing some red flag laws, cut 37, please, Brian.
This is asked the Justice Department to publish a model red flag legislation so states can start crafting their own laws right now.
But here in the state of Wisconsin, and I realize people are listening beyond our borders here, but Republicans would take much umbrage to that. How dare you try to take a guy's gun away just because he poses an immediate threat? He's gotten due process from a court of law, and a judge has determined that person should not have a firearm at this time. How dare you try to take guns away from that kind of fine, upstanding citizen?
Well, those are the very Republicans, perhaps, that the Dems will have to work with. Cut number 38, please, Brian.
This is a view by the American people as an American issue. And I'm willing to work with anyone to get these done. And it's long past time that we act.
Anyone?
Just a couple more from President Donald Trump. The daily deaths cut 30.
Biden.
I'm sorry, Biden. The daily deaths.
Take it back.
I take it back. I take it back.
Every day in this country, 316 people are shot every single day.
Seems like a big number.
That's crazy. That is crazy. One more from President Joe Biden, the Senate. We heard from Manchin. Let's hear what Joe has to say.
I believe the Senate should immediately pass 3 House-passed bills to close loopholes that allow gun purchasers to bypass the background checks.
Okay. I think there's a lot of people who support that. A little bit more from the Washington Post on this. As they mentioned, among Biden's highest profile moves Thursday was directing his administration to take action on the ghost guns. You heard that, firearms without serial numbers that are sold in kits and assembled at home. And the president also directed the Justice Department to draft a new rule regulating a device that can be placed on a pistol to turn it into a short-barreled rifle.
844-967-2789. Dick from Madison, appreciate your patience. What do you got for us?
Well, guys, here's what I got for you. When you were talking about Trump earlier endorsing Ron Johnson, can you imagine how the feelings of Glenn Grossman and freshman Scott Fitzgerald? I mean, Grossman's the #1 bootlicker, and he doesn't even get mentioned. He'll be up for election. So here's an idea I have. Since Trump did such a stellar job in Georgia helping out with his campaigning for the Senate seats and lost both of them, maybe we could get the trifecta if he comes here to help Grossman, Fitzgerald, and Johnson. We could get rid of all 3 of the scumbags.
Well, hopefully Brian Stile and Mike Gallagher would also attend the fine rally. I suspect Donald Trump will be back to darken our doorstep. I'm looking at you, Mosity. I'm looking at you, Waukesha Expo Center, and perhaps even the Holiday Inn Express. He likes to go there as well.
But don't you think it's a great idea? I mean, we could get a 3-fer out of him. He's such a great asset as a campaigner.
But Dick, you understand, in the reddest part of the state of Wisconsin, and it wasn't always like this, but Wisconsin has crept more and more red in the Northwoods. We talked to our friend Kirk Bangstead. God forbid a guy put a Biden sign on his bar in Minocqua, Wisconsin. It makes him public enemy #1.
Yeah. No, I just think that though you do have to admit, Grossman's feelings have to be hurt to not even be mentioned. I mean, come on. The guy's been hauling water for him ever since he's been in.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dick. I had a thought. Grothman, we often kid, Grothman, a confirmed bachelor, maybe a resident of Mom's basement, often calling for the meatloaf, right?
Mom,
where's the meatloaf? Well, here's what I would point out. Donald Trump, reportedly, when Chris Christie visited him down at Mar-a-Lago, what did he force feed Chris Christie? Let everyone else order their own meals, but Chris Christie had to eat Mom's meatloaf. Do you recall that?
Vaguely. And I think Trump gets 2 scoops of ice cream. And
you get
else
one
gets
scoop,
one.
But
So
you'll get
weird.
nothing like it, Spalding, except Mom's meatloaf.
You'll get nothing like it.
Yeah. 844-967-2789. The President Joe Biden, putting forth some ideas on gun safety.
Now, we've also got,
I was
going to say, we've got sound from Jen Psaki as well, but finish your thought.
Well, I guess I just want to get your opinion on this. I mean, I didn't hear, and I'm a gun owner. I'm a CC concealed carry guy. I didn't see anything here that I object to.
Well, but you're reasonable, Dom. You're not Wayne LaPierre. You don't hang out on a yacht for your own personal safety.
Well, I mean, obviously, but I get that. But that's just a hustle, man. I mean, let's just be frank about what all that is. That's Wayne LaPierre using this nonprofit to pad their pockets and live the lifestyle.
No doubt.
That's what it is. So no, but I'm talking about regular, normal gun owning, citizens of this country who I believe I have the right to protect myself with a weapon, but I also believe I don't have the right to a bazooka And I have no problem having, the government, us, we the people, be involved in, regulating the manufacture and distribution of these weapons. If you have, homemade kits, it's basically a workaround. It is dangerous.
Well, Dominic, even Scalia, the conservative Scalia, now departed, even he didn't think you had the right to own a bazooka. He believed that guns could be regulated. Specifically, I think the ruling he discussed was plastic weapons. You can ban them from airplanes, can you not? You can't bring a sidearm on an airplane. So therefore, there are reasonable times to regulate possession of firearms. Even the conservative on the Supreme Court believed that. And above and beyond that, let's not forget what the American people believe in is certainly not being reflected by the Republican Party. They no longer reflect their own constituents. The NRA certainly doesn't. They reflect the will of gun manufacturers.
Right.
That's where the real money's being made, because all of the combined memberships of the NRA are drips in the bucket relative to what the gun manufacturers put behind that organization. You didn't get a 108-foot yacht on Johnny's NRA annual membership dues. So you look at issues like that. You can look at issues like climate change or legalized marijuana or expansion of Medicaid or Obamacare. I mean, you name the issue, there is much more public sentiment, even amongst Republicans. And the one issue that certainly comes to mind, fair maps, good governance. Republicans, conservatives, they believe in that just like we believe in that. We're not so different. They don't eat their children much.
Are you sure?
I'm talking about the people, our neighbors,
right.
those out there
in
the rural parts of the state of Wisconsin. They would like to think that their vote matters just as much as our votes matter here in the city, right?
Yes.
We all share that.
Absolutely.
So it's not the rank and file. It's not the people that believe in this god-awful form of governance. This is what corporate donors to Republicans believe in, and they're willing to sell their souls damn cheap. And we, the American people, Tom, for you, a little message discipline, like Tom would do it. We, the people, don't think billionaires should buy elections. We, the people, would like to see the reflection of our will through the governance of our leaders. But we don't get much of that round here. And Joe Biden, certainly these are reasonable requests. The vast majority of NRA members would believe that. But, outside of their dues memberships, they don't give a damn. Those are dwarfed by the weapons manufacturers. And the narrative that Joe Biden's going to take your gun, well, they're very excited about that because that means they're going to see a surge in the sale of guns. And they're in the business of selling guns and death. Come back with us. More Devil's Advocates. You can always be a part of this big program. 844-967-2789.
Hey, Ma, can we get some meatloaf?
Well, we're waiting.
We got to start eating babies.
You'll get nothing.
My Congresswoman, Rep. Gwen Moore, over 100 Republicans signing on to that Texas lawsuit. What are your thoughts on your fellow Republicans in the House?
Honestly, this is what we all sign up for. This is a democracy. You run races. I've been involved in races where people lose, and I'm ashamed of the fact that we had one congressman, I guess he's brand new, who voted for this nonsense.
Listen to Devil's Advocates live weekdays from 2 to 5 p.m.
The people voted to give Democrats a mandate for bold action. From COVID relief to climate change and racial injustice, the problems we're facing are large, and we need bold solutions. We can't afford more obstruction from Senator Ron Johnson and the Republicans. Text ACT to 668-366 to join Move On. Message and data rates may apply. MoveOn.org political action paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising. Poll.moveon.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
Hi, this is Dom from the Devil's Advocates inviting you to join us on Patreon.com. Patreon allows for our audience to access exclusive programming not available anywhere else and gives you the ability to directly support the greatest radio show ever. History's patrons have supported the works of Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Monet, and now with your support, the Devil's Advocates. So please go to Patreon.com and search the Devil's Advocates to pick your subscription. That's Patreon.com and the Devil's Advocates, the greatest radio show ever. All right, well, what does your church tell you about when people say that they're the second coming of God? My reason tells me the man is certifiable. I want your opinion, Gary.
I would say anybody who comes back and says that, I would say you'd be the Antichrist.
I am the chosen one.
So Trump is the Antichrist, then, Gary, by that logic?
I'm not saying he is, but I'm
But
saying
he
you gotta-
said he's the chosen one.
I am the chosen one.
Gary, by your biblical logic, Donald Trump is the Antichrist.
Listen to the Devil's Advocates live weekdays from 3 to 6 p.m.
I don't think the heavy stuff's going to come down for quite a while.
Save the $2 on tomorrow's paper. Listen to the Devil's Advocates today.
And we are back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. You can be a part of this fine program at 844-967-2789.
Dominic, I've got rain clouds gathering here on the west side of Madison, outside the broadcast bunker 2.0. And normally I don't give a damn about the weather. I'm just going to drive home and plop down on the couch most nights, watch me some Rachel Maddow, some MSNBC, flip back and forth, see what Tucker's talking about. But tonight, my kid's got his second football game. Ooh. And the first football game in spring football seems quite odd to be talking about attending a football game. But he's a freshman, and we inaugurated a beautiful stadium in Verona, Wisconsin. They played the very first football game there. The freshmen got to play first. Wonderful facility, AstroTurf. Man, looked like a small college field. But the weather was like winter weather. It was like 30 degrees, but then there was a steady 25 mile per hour cutting wind. It was miserable. I whined about it on the radio. And tonight, the weather's a little warmer, but the weatherman says rain 90%, basically from here to the end of the game. So I'm going to be a soaking wet ragamuffin by the end of the game.
Well, you can just drop him off and not go.
Well, I got to go. He'll know. He knows. I get a big mouth when I start. Yeah, go Cardinals.
You're one of those.
Oh, I'm one of
yelling
those.
At the refs too, man. Come on.
I resist the temptation. But he is the center and the long snapper. And, it was tough enough when your hand's frozen to snap the ball back. But now they've added long snapper to his position. And, he's been practicing this week. I'm proud of him. He's gotten quite good. Earlier, he was not as good. Earlier, he was just the center. And they threw him in the role of long snapper last week. And I'm like, that was not a good effort. No offense. No one had ever taught. I didn't know how to long snap. I don't know how to do it. So he's been in the yard. His brother and I have been receiving the long snaps, and then he gets his first crack at it tonight, and it's going to be raining cats and dogs. What could possibly go wrong?
It builds character.
It's tremendously big and tremendously wet.
844-967-2789. Wisco Paul, we see you there. Be patient for a moment.
Crudy, talking about the executive action proposed by President Joe Biden, didn't take long. Pushback from Republicans already. A headline at the Hill.
They're taking their guns.
West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Morrisey, a Republican, on Thursday threatened to sue the Biden administration over President Biden's proposed gun safety measures. Morrisey issued a statement threatening to be in court very quickly if Biden follows through on his proposals, which the president unveiled today. Here's a quote from the Attorney General from West Virginia. Defending the Second Amendment remains one of the most important priorities for the West Virginia Attorney General's office, Morrisey said. I will not allow the far left to run roughshod over our citizens' gun rights. If President Biden follows through on his proposals, we will be in court very quickly. Gun violence, your eye out, kid. The gun violence and the senseless death attributed to it should pain all Americans. However, the evil acts of a select few should never be a catalyst for stripping the lawful masses of their constitutional rights, especially their right to self-defense and to bear arms.
Sounds like the NRA stance. Dominic, it was what, less than a week ago. Kim Reynolds, the governor of the state of Iowa, signed a bill making it easier to pass background checks and permit concealed carry. Apparently, no more background checks required and no actual permitting for concealed carry. Freedom.
Oh, a constitutional carry.
Governor Kim Reynolds, according to the Associated Press, signed a bill. This was last Friday, that will make handgun carry permits and background checks on unlicensed sales optional in Iowa. As of July 1st, people can buy handguns from private, non-licensed sources such as websites, gun shows, and individuals without a permit or a background check. People will also be able to carry a gun into public places such as grocery stores and malls without prior safety training or a permit. Freedom, man. This is why Joe Biden's got to push executive orders, because legislation being passed on a state-by-state basis is ridiculous. It's ridiculous to take down the background checks and say anyone can carry a gun anywhere without permit, without proof of competence, hell, without proof of anything. What could possibly go wrong?
844-967-2789. Wisco Paul, you are up. Welcome. What do you got for us today?
Hey, Paul.
Hey, good afternoon, Devils. A little lack of common sense. I have concealment carry like you, Dom, and you need training. At least ladies, I believe you need training. We also need a red flag rule. You have to have some kind of competence to buy assault weapons. And I also believe in background checks, at least for assault weapons. It's just common sense.
Well, why not for all weapons, Paul? I'm a background check. If you're a felon, if you are a prior domestic violence offender, you should get rejected when it's time to buy a gun. I'm sorry, man. You can take away someone's right to vote if they commit a felony. Why can't you take away their right to own a gun if they commit a felony and verify that fact?
Well, I don't disagree with you, but we have to start somewhere, Crudy. And because the NRA, I don't know, they just seem all powerful. But what I'm trying to say here,
I think
you need. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think the NRA's goose is cooked, but please, Paul, what were you going to say, buddy?
Well, I hope so, because common sense dictates, and I think this is all about votes on the GOP side of the, anyway, but you have to, no way, no how can you sell assault weapons to people that aren't competent. It's just common sense. And a background check. You got to start somewhere. That's somewhere to start. And if they can't agree to that, then there's just something wrong with them, Crudy. It's just ridiculous.
I agree with you, Paul. 844-967-2789. Fancy Brand's screening one more, and we'll try to sneak them in this hour, because Dom, coming up in the next hour, we got some big guests. They include Joel Brennan. He is the cabinet secretary for Tony Evers, heads up the Department of Administration. And above and beyond that, we've got the Attorney General of the great state of Wisconsin, Josh Kaul. He's going to join us at 4:30 today. So that happy hour, it's going to be happier. Ken Bob from Daily Bill, give you like 30 seconds here, man.
Okay, that was quick. I just wanted to say, Joe Manchin, he's trying to make us crazy, and that's what he's doing. But you got to listen to his words. And what he said was, I won't weaken the filibuster. And then he gave the examples of the Supreme Court and the federal judges. He did not specifically say he would not make it a talking filibuster or make it a majority, a 60-40 majority at all times to keep it going. So he's a real weasel that way. So, but he needs to have a scream and yell anyway. So go ahead and do it.
Ken Bob, appreciate your call. Stick around. The happy hour with Joel Brennan and Attorney General Josh Kaul.
It's tremendously big and tremendously wet.
Hey folks, Patrick here from Pegasus Games, here to remind you that we're open for all your at-home gaming needs, both online at pegasusgames.com or in-store from noon to 6, with extended hours on Saturday and Sunday morning from 10 a.m. to noon for high-risk customers. From our new line of puzzles to pass the time, to the perfect board game to reconnect with family and friends. Walk-ins welcome or curbside pickup available over the phone or online at pegasusgames.com. Pegasus Games, home to games you never outgrow.
Rocker, we gave the people live music. Isn't that what they wanted?
Of course not, Jimmy. Give the people live music and they'll set up a brat stand with a beer caddy.
Will Rocker get his beer and brat? Catch Max Inc. Radio this Saturday evening to find out. We'll have the best of local music from Wisconsin and live music performed in the Devil's Lair. Go to maxincradio.com for the live music schedule. Max Inc. Radio starts at 6 on Devil Radio 92.7 FM.
Did you bring a lawn chair, Jimmy?
You are listening to WTTN Columbus, W224EG Madison, always streaming at devilradio927.com.
AP News. I'm Ed Donahue. A pulmonologist, Dr. Martin Tobin, has been testifying in Minneapolis at the murder trial of Derek Chauvin about what killed George Floyd.
Mr. Floyd died from a low level of oxygen.
He testified for the prosecution about the pressure placed by Chauvin's knee on Floyd's neck and back.
At that point, there's not an ounce of oxygen left in his body, in his entire body at 20, 25, 41.
And so was the knee then lifted off of his neck at the point there was no more oxygen in his body?
No, the knee remained on the neck for another 3 minutes and 2 seconds.
The defense has claimed drug use and his health, heart issues, led to Floyd's death.
You would expect that he would be complaining of chest pain, and you would expect that he would be demonstrating a very rapid respiratory rate. We don't see either.
Tape from Court TV. Chauvin is charged with murder and manslaughter in Floyd's death. President Biden is taking executive actions.
Today, we're taking steps to confront not just the gun crisis, but what is actually a public health crisis.
The president announced a half dozen executive actions following recent mass shootings.
The idea that we have so many people dying every single day from gun violence in America is a blemish on our character as a nation.
Tennessee has become the latest state to allow most adults 21 and older to carry handguns without first clearing a background check and training. An associate of Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz is working toward a plea deal with federal prosecutors investigating a sex.
Hello, Joel Brennan. How are you?
Potentially escalates the legal and political jeopardy facing Gaetz.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us.
Planned Parenthood says it's launching a $2 million.
You sound great, my friend. I just need a video if you want.
Virus shot. Stocks finished higher.
Get about.
Okay, if I don't do the video?
Not a problem, man. We'll do it just fine.
This is AP News.
Ad sponsored by Open Jar Concepts. Attention, this is an important message for
we have about
anyone that has
4
been
minutes till the
diagnosed
show
with
starts.
cancer after being exposed to Roundup or other weed killers.
Thanks again, man.
The Internal Agency for Research on Cancer warned that overexposure to Roundup and other weed killers may increase the risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Monsanto, the manufacturer of Roundup, may have known that Roundup and other weed killers were likely linked to organ damage and cancer. This information was hidden from the public as proprietary trade secret since 1981, and Monsanto may have failed to warn of the potential risk of cancer. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with cancer after being exposed to Roundup or other weed killers, you may be entitled to significant compensation. Call us now at 800-537-2701. Our network of attorneys are ready to fight for you. You'll pay nothing unless there's a recovery in your favor. Call now for a free consultation at 800-537-2701. You must protect your legal rights. Call 800-537-2701. Again, 800-537-2701.
This is Dom from the Devil's Advocates. Cody and I have been doing this show for almost 10 years, and we've never had a more engaged, dialed in, and motivated audience, and we love them for it. Now is the time for you to reach the greatest audience ever. Call now and advertise with the Devil's Advocates and Devil Radio, 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM. Get your message out and let the greatest radio audience know how to support your business. Call Luke at 608-819-TALK, that's 608-819-8255, or go to darnwi.com.
Stream Progressive News and Talk 24/7, as well as download exclusive podcasts and interviews at devilradio927.com. That's devilradio927.com.
Hi, this is Dom from the Devil's Advocates inviting you to join us on Patreon.com. Patreon allows for our audience to access exclusive programming not available anywhere else and gives you the ability to directly support the greatest radio show ever. History's patrons have supported the works of Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Monet, and now with your support, the Devil's Advocates. So please go to Patreon.com and search the Devil's Advocates to pick your subscription. That's Patreon.com and the Devil's Advocates, the greatest radio show ever.
Herbal Aspect is Madison's premier supplier of lab-tested, high-quality Delta-8 hemp products. My partners and I created the exclusive Herbal Aspect product line to make great CBD and Delta-8 wellness supplements available to as many folks as possible. Jen from Madison says, I've tried a lot of different local places, and I think this product surpasses them all. Use the code DEVILRADIO to get 5% off your Herbal Aspect branded products at herbalaspect.com.
Madison, you say what? Each weeknight from 5 to 6, don't miss out on a single day of the Earl Ingram Show right here on Devil Radio 92.7 FM, 1580 AM.
Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM. I'm Brian Kelly with your headlines. The Wisconsin Department of Health Services confirmed that the state will start losing $50 million per month in supplemental food in May. This is a direct result of Republican lawmakers striking down Governor Evers' COVID emergency order and mask mandate. DHS spokeswoman Elizabeth Goodsit points out that if the order had been in place one more day, food aid would have lasted through the month of May. Rep. Joe Sanfilippo says he assumes the Assembly will allow Evers to declare an emergency solely for food aid, but that would be up to Speaker Voss. Rep. Evan Goyke said, quote, "It seems to me that $55 million in the month of May is worthy of our legislative action, so we're not going to let the issue just fade away. Hopefully we'll be able to avoid the loss of benefits, even if it's a super inefficient use of all of our time." For Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Brian Kelly.
Warning, you are about to listen to the greatest radio show ever. And due to contractual obligations and to shield our airwaves corporate licensees from any semblance of liability, responsibility, and gullibility, we must tell you the views represented on this show are not necessarily those of this station or its management. This radio show contains differing points of view on current political topics, and due to the nature of its contents, it should be heard by everyone. Thank you for listening. Now live from the heart of liberal Wisconsin, where the political party is just beginning, welcome to the Devil's Advocate Show. Best friends proving it's never personal, only politics.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Now here are your hosts, Dom and Crute.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. Dominic, we are sliding into the 4 o'clock Thursday happy hour. Also, the Masters has begun, and we've got a fine guest right from the top. He is Joel Brennan. He is the secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Administration. I believe a first-time guest. Joel Brennan, welcome to the Devil's Advocates.
Hey, nice to join you guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, Joel, for joining us, sir. We took note of a op-ed you wrote. I want to make sure I get this title correct. How the Wisconsin Republican Party became the party of no. And Joel, in this context, you're talking about what? The budget to maintain and fix and construct. Tell them what you mean, sir.
Right. It's really what I was talking about there is the state's capital budget. So the state has the operating budget which the governor introduced in February, and then very shortly thereafter introduced the capital budget, which is really about the state's building projects. So about, as it usually breaks down, about half of that is UW system projects. The other half are projects in state buildings, other facilities, veterans complexes, the health facilities that we have around the state. So really that's what it is. And for the second time, really, this is unprecedented. Since Governor Evers took over, the Republicans on the State Building Commission have never voted in favor of any capital project. They've just become, as the title indicated, they've become the party of no. No to veterans, no to kids who are deaf or hard of hearing, no to the Department of Natural Resources and state parks, just the ultimate kind of upkeep and capital building projects that you need to be sustainable over the long term.
Now, Joel, there are some in the audience that are going to say, all parties do this, but I believe you pointed out in your op-ed, this has not really been an all parties do it sort of thing. The process, the governor putting forth a capital expenditure budget and the Joint Finance Committee, the other party signing off on it. Well, that's been the way it's gone since the moon landing. I think that was 1968, Joel.
Right. The moon landing bonanza, the Cartwright family. I think we referenced a few of those things. But yeah, this is just the kind of the unprecedented times that we live in. And no matter who was governor, there's been split party control over the course of the last 5 decades, over the course, frankly, of my lifetime. And during that time, there's always been the opportunity for there to be some agreement on these things before it gets turned over to the legislature.
And Joel, even procedurally, they really had to go through and stick it to Governor Evers and, by extension, the people of the great state of Wisconsin, because construction expense ain't going to get any cheaper. But they had to vote down individually 88 individual projects. I mean, that's an all-day process, Joel, just to say no 88 times.
Yeah, in fact, I think once or twice one of them got confused and said yes on one. I think that there was a time that happened during the course of the 3 or 4 hours of that meeting. But yeah, they just, and this is the same thing that happened. It was like a Groundhog's Day event from 2 years ago, because, at least at that time, some of them were for them before they were against them. They had voted for them in the committee, and then they voted against them in the full building commission. And it's unfortunate, because these are the kind of projects that create jobs. They maintain the buildings that, for those who live in Madison, they may have seen just this week, we had an unfortunate incident where a piece of Van Nuys Hall fell off. And this is just the kind of infrastructure and just the kind of maintenance and upkeep that goes into the capital budget. These things don't just take care of themselves. And unfortunately, I think we've got some people in the legislature who believe that that's the case.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. We have Joel Brennan, the Secretary of Wisconsin Department of Administration, joining us. Joel, it's a pleasure to speak with you. The Republicans in this regard saying no, okay, have they offered any sort of alternative or compromise to any of these 88 issues?
No, really, I think what they have said is just let the legislature decide. I think that's been their mantra. It was 2 years ago. It's been some of their reaction now. And, I think you guys understand there's a reason why the governor is involved in a capital project or in the capital budget that covers the entire state. Now you throw it in the legislature, and there will be, members who want to protect something in their district, but want to screw somebody in a different district, or, they simply don't have the ability to look beyond their parochial interests. And that's why you have a statewide purpose with the State Building Commission. And that's been the tradition over the last 50, 60 years.
Joel, the American Rescue Plan going to funnel billions of dollars into the state of Wisconsin. Does it impact the Department of Administration or any of these other projects? If we had this conversation now with the Republicans, would there be a different outcome?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dom. They did, one of the suggestions while we were meeting was, well, the governor's got this $3.2 billion of federal money, just stick some of that in there. Well, while the final guidance hasn't come out from the Treasury yet, the things that are pinpointed in that act that you can invest in the capital, on the capital side, are water, sewer, and broadband. And the governor's already said that we want to continue some of the unprecedented investments that he's made in broadband over the last couple of years, but you don't protect state buildings with that. You're not able to build new buildings or fix the buildings that are 60 years old on the campuses around the state with those dollars. We will make the best possible use of those federal dollars, the ARPA dollars. There'll be significant resources that'll come into the state, but those are about recovery in the short term, and making sure that we benefit the industries that have been decimated by COVID-19, making sure that individuals and families, because the pain from COVID-19 has not been felt equally. And so we need to make sure that those dollars are being spent effectively and efficiently. And some of that may be on some capital projects, but it'll be much more limited than the ongoing capital investments that the state has made, for many, many decades.
Joel, as mentioned, we saw your op-ed as published in the Capital Times. And I was excited because I was glad to hear from you in this regard, but also a little cautious and want to get your sense, jumping into this very political, I guess I would call it, statement, putting out an op-ed like that. Are you concerned about any blowback from Republicans coming out and saying specifically that they are the party of no?
Well, I hope that I have friends friendships that I've cultivated since I've been in state government. I'm not a lifer. I came to Madison just a few years ago, and I've worked in other capacities, and I've worked with people of all different political stripes. And I think, if you're a pragmatist and you want to get stuff done, you have to call people out when they are doing things that are, one, embarrassing for the state, and two, have the potential of hurting us over the long term. And these are, the $2.5 billion that the governor outlined for capital projects. Those are not his pet projects. Those come from 6-year plans that the agencies and the university do. These are things that are, buildings that were built in the 1960s and 1970s that have a useful life that they're coming to the end of. And so, we need to make these investments, and for people simply to turn a blind eye towards that. You have things where, I'm not saying the sky is falling. Quite literally, in the last several days, a piece of a building fell off on the UW-Madison campus. And, so this is not hyperbole. These are the things that you need to do to protect life safety, to ensure that the UW system can turn out innovators, to ensure that you can have efficient workplaces around the state. So, none of this is about hyperbole. It's about how do we get something done.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Our fine guest, Joel Brennan. He is a cabinet secretary at the Wisconsin Department of Administration. Joel, recently, the national Republicans have talked a lot about the moving of the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, describing that as cancel culture. And how dare you take, this revenue and this investment and these jobs away in the middle of a pandemic. But I would basically look at that very same assessment and say this canceling of these 88 projects effectively takes a huge investment away and a lot of jobs away. Can you speak to the jobs and the investment lost?
Sure. Well, I think it's about, almost a $4 billion economic impact in the state from these projects around the state. And people can understand that these are projects, some of them are big projects, building a new building, a new state office building in the city of Milwaukee to replace a 58-year-old building there. But a number of these are $3-4 million projects or less through the Department of Natural Resources in state parks. There are things about kitchens in the veterans' homes that we have. So they're kind of the blocking and tackling of making sure we can deliver state services. But at the same time, at a time where the state needs to recover economically, these are investments that we can make that create jobs, that provide opportunity for people, and our economic development projects in 31 different counties around the state. So there's an awful lot that the state can do to be part of this recovery. And we can't stand on the sidelines while people, need to recover, and while we need to make investments for the long term. The thing I guess I'd say about the capital budget is, and there's a lot of discussion about the state office buildings and people returning to work, and how are we going to use state office buildings in the future? And those are great questions that we were not only grappling with during COVID-19, but even prior to that, about what the workforce and the workplace are going to look like. But we make these investments not just for 6 months or for a year or for 2 years, but for 30, 40, 50 years. And so we have to be prudent. We have to be wise in the way that we do that. And I think we've been pretty good stewards of this, and we can create economic opportunity and still doing the right thing for the long term for the state.
Joel, my little buddy Dominic has often taken issue with the fact that we effectively use cash accounting and not accrual accounting here in the state of Wisconsin. Under the prior Walker administration, there were some financial gamesmanship, some tossing and scooping of the debt going on to move it off this month's books and onto next year's books. Joel, is any of that part of what's going on here?
Actually, we're in an enviable position on our capital debt as a state. if you look at the benchmarks around the country, Wisconsin does very well. And we're in a position where money is still relatively cheap. You've got historic lows when it comes to interest rates. And so this is really a pretty responsible way for us to do it. We've done a lot in refinancing since the governor took over. We spent some money on lowering the capital debt around the state. So we're in an enviable position, and we're in a position where we can make these investments responsibly over time. So, really, I think there's the opportunity and the benefit in the short term that we can gain from these by also doing what's right for the long-term economics of the state.
Thank you, Joel Brennan. He is the Secretary, Wisconsin Department of Administration. And someday soon, we'll call you a friend of the Devils. Thank you, Joel. More Devils. We'll be right back.
Thanks, guys.
Hi, this is Brad from Zero Res. If you need someone to help with your carpet cleaning, business or residence, please give us a
Joel,
call.
thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you.
An amazing
Thanks for having me,
team of
guys.
friendly technicians. Call us at 848-9000 or schedule online at zeroresmadison.com.
Wisconsin is stimulated. More than $5 billion in COVID-19 aid. That's more than $3,000 in the bank account of the average Wisconsin household right now for the WBA. Let Devil Radio help your company benefit from the expected leap in consumer spending. Advertise here and reach our engaged local and statewide audiences while getting the exceptional value of our pandemic ad pricing. Ending soon. Go online at devilradio927.com today to get started. So, Darcy Haber, I hear you have solar panels on your office building. Are all real estate brokers tree huggers?
Crew, you should know that at Solidarity Realty, we provide outstanding real estate service while adhering to our core progressive values. Environmental sustainability is a big part of that.
So you really walk your talk, huh?
Yep, I even walk to work.
Come on, always?
Well, sometimes I bike. And if I have an appointment across town, I use my hybrid.
Solidarity Realty. They're real, they're solid, and they're honest. Find them online at solidarityrealty.com. There is an alternative.
An industry that started in America should stay in America. At Ignite Glass and Gifts, we strive to offer tons of American-made products, most of which we create by hand in our glass blowing shop. You'll know your product will have thicker, longer-lasting glass, and it's artistically made right here at home. Madison's favorite for glass gifts and vape. Ignite Glass and Gifts, Monona Drive, Williamson Street, and Odana Road. Keep it American-made at Ignite.
Stream Progressive News and Talk 24/7, as well as download exclusive podcasts and interviews at devilradio927.com. That's devilradio927.com. From Baraboo to Horicon, WTTN 1580 AM is News Talk Radio built for the 99%. Rural Wisconsin's home for Devil Radio.
When they go low, we get high. Dom and Krutz are the Devil's Advocates.
And we are back from the 420 break. Thank you so much for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. If you have not checked us out on the Facebooks, make sure you do so. We're getting close to a new level. That's the Devil's Advocates radio, also on YouTube and on Twitter at Devil Radio.
We're always seeking a higher level of super coolness.
A higher level.
I get stuck on the mathematics when we're immediately below a threshold. So I appreciate the little endorsement for our Facebook page. I want to thank our most recent guest, a fine one, Joel Brennan. He is the Secretary, Wisconsin Department of Administration. One question we failed to ask the DOA Secretary, though, Dom, is he aware of the pending citations against two of the greatest radio show hosts ever and our fine producer, Fancy Brian Kelly? We have fine legal counsel. We are fighting tooth and nail these citations issued for entering a locked building to try and match the jackassery of the Republicans that were singing their Christmas COVID carols, and they had their tree. So we brought our tree and we covered their event, and they didn't get arrested or cited.
It wasn't locked. We got in there. I don't pick a lock, man. It's too much work.
We are 3-0 against the Department of Administration, Joel. If you haven't heard of us, we're kind of a big deal. Might not want to cross us in the future. We'll take it up perhaps with the Attorney General of the great state of Wisconsin, Josh Kaul, joining us very soon at 4:30. Did you see, though, Dom, I got to ask you, the reaction. I heard Fancy Brian talk about it. Filling in for the news. Thank you, Fancy Brian, this week. You can certainly join us, Fancy, if you want to talk about this story that you featured. But Robin Voss, less than an hour after Jill Underly had been declared the winner of the race for superintendent of the Department of Public Instruction, top education person in the state of Wisconsin. And Robin Voss said, well, clearly the teachers unions own this office and they own Underly, and therefore no more money for the Department of Public Instruction. And a vengeful, petty little tirade this snowflake issued off via the Twitter machine, Dom. Did you hear about that?
I did. Now, I'm not clear. Did he clarify? I thought I didn't see the tweet, but I believe he tried to clarify afterwards. What he really, really meant was not to defund public schools, although I believe he misspelled his Twitter feed. But yeah, the reaction from the speaker seemed a little petty.
Well, let me give you a little of the story from the Journal Sentinel. Molly Beck, one of the most influential lawmakers, is he really, over the state budgeting process, that part's true, said he wouldn't support increasing funding for the state education agency because its new leader, elected Tuesday, was heavily backed by Democrats and teachers unions. But had the other one that was heavily backed by Republicans and school choice, would that have been fine with you, Robin?
It absolutely would have.
Assembly Speaker Robin Voss, a Republican from Rochester, made the statement just an hour after the Pecatonica School District Superintendent Jill Underly was elected state school superintendent, a position that oversees the State Department of Public Instruction. Voss went to war with Underly immediately after her election, after outside spending fueled by Democratic groups set a record for state superintendent races, which are supposed to be nonpartisan, but aren't, as more political groups spend to back candidates and state parties promote them. Here in part is a quote. Teachers unions own the DPI, not the parents or the students or the taxpayers. Count me as someone who isn't going to support putting another nickel into this unaccountable state bureaucracy, said the man who signed, or at least passed through his chamber, the uncapped mandate to expand voucher schools statewide that's, blown up to $1 billion plus. But he won't put another nickel into the State Department of Public Instruction. Anyways, it was, he being Voss, was responding to a tweet from a Milwaukee Journal Sentinel political columnist who said, the teachers union still controls the State Department of Public Instruction. Well, that was Daniel Bice, of course. The winners and the losers. In response to Tuesday's election results, Underly said she wants to work with the legislature and Governor Tony Evers to help all kids, no matter how their parents vote. I think she means even if they voted for Robin Voss. I think it's clear from yesterday's results that supporting our local schools and our children isn't a partisan issue, she said in a statement. There's plenty of common ground here. As I've already said, I want resources to flow to schools to help with mental health, credit recovery, staffing, and more. Kerr was largely backed by conservative groups who support the expansion of private school vouchers and Wisconsin Republicans, including likely GOP gubernatorial candidate and former Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Clayfish. Kerr also drew some support from Democrats like Senator Lena Taylor. I know, very disappointed in that. Lena Taylor, a school choice advocate, and former U.S. Education Secretary Arne Duncan. And that was a very unusual circumstance. Arne Duncan was literally a student of Deborah Kerr. Right. So they had a personal relationship. Dom, we talked about the outside spending, topped $1 million, $1 million, about 797,000 by a liberal group, A Better Wisconsin Together, the Wisconsin Education Association, Council Teachers Union, and abortion advocacy group Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin. But no one talks much about Kerr support from the American Federation for Children, the 200,000 plus she got from Betsy DeVos and company. But Robin Voss is all down for Betsy DeVos.
He said, I didn't say defend schools. I think he meant defund. I didn't say defend schools. I said no more money for Madison bureaucrats who only answer to the teachers union. Some clarity or not from Speaker
I'm
Boss.
not any clearer. It's clear as mud.
When are we going to see any of these gangster teachers union people do anything horrible? You attacked the unions and they showed up and sang at you. Where is this strong arm crap? Where's this evil stuff coming from?
And they try to teach my kids and make them play football in the rain, sometimes on Thursday nights, just because they want to. Come back with us, a fine guest, the Attorney General, great state of Wisconsin, Josh Kaul.
We have seen a small increase in deaths, which is a good thing.
So I got that going for me, which is nice.
Make sure you listen to Devil Radio 92.7. If you do, you go to heaven.
When you're having computer problems, you need a company you trust to get things working again, quickly and affordably. Madison Computer Works has been doing that for business and residential customers for decades. Our computer care plans take away the hassle of being without your computer or needing to bring it in for repair. Starting at only $10 a month, our local and friendly techs provide remote help and can fix most problems in just minutes. Call 608-231-8000 and sign up today. Madison Computer Works, computers that work for you.
This is Dom from the Devil's Advocates. Cody and I have been doing this show for almost 10 years, and we've never had a more engaged, dialed in, and motivated audience, and we love them for it. Now is the time for you to reach the greatest audience ever. Call now and advertise with the Devil's Advocates and Devil Radio, 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM. Get your message out and let the greatest radio audience know how to support your business. Call Luke at 608-819-TALK, that's 608-819-8255, or go to DARNWI.
Texas shooting. I'm Tim McGuire with an AP News Minute. Police in Bryan, Texas say a number of people have been injured in a shooting and the suspected shooter remains on the loose. President Biden taking half a dozen executive actions, including tightening regulations on homemade so-called ghost guns.
Today, we're taking steps to confront not just the gun crisis, but what is actually a public health crisis.
Between the mass shootings in Atlanta and Colorado, Biden says there were more than 850 additional shootings that killed 250 people and injured 500 others in this country. York County, South Carolina Sheriff's Department says former NFL player Philip Adams fatally shot 5 people, including a prominent doctor, his wife, and their 2 grandchildren, before later killing himself. Dr. Robert Leslie, his wife Barbara Leslie, were killed along with their 2 grandchildren. A man doing air conditioning work at their home, James Lewis, was also shot to death. Lewis' co-worker was wounded. I'm Tim McGuire.
Ad sponsored by Open Jar Concepts. Attention, this is an important message for anyone that has been diagnosed with cancer after being exposed to Roundup or other weed killers. The Internal Agency for Research on Cancer warned that overexposure to Roundup and other weed killers may increase the risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Monsanto, the manufacturer of Roundup, may have known that Roundup and other weed killers were likely linked to organ damage and cancer. This information was hidden from the public as proprietary trade secret since 1981, and Monsanto may have failed to warn of the potential risk of cancer. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with cancer after being exposed to Roundup or other weed killers, you may be entitled to significant compensation. Call us now at 800-537-2701. Our network of attorneys are ready to fight for you. You'll pay nothing unless there's a recovery in your favor. Call now for a free consultation at 800-537-2701. You must protect your legal rights. Call 800-537-2701. Again, 800-537-2701.
Devil Radio 92.7 FM and WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Brian Kelly with your headlines. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos said he would not support increases in DPI funding because the recently elected superintendent, Dr. Jill Underly, was supported by the Democratic Party and teachers' unions. In a statement on Twitter just an hour after her election, Vos wrote, quote, "The teachers' union owns the DPI, not the parents or the students or the taxpayers. Count me as someone who isn't going to support putting another nickel into this unaccountable state bureaucracy." Dr. Underly responded by saying she wanted to, quote, "help all kids no matter how their parents vote. I think it's clear from yesterday's results that supporting our local schools and our children isn't a partisan issue. There's plenty of common ground here. As I've already said, I want resources to flow to schools to help with mental health, credit recovery, staffing, and more." WTTN 1580 AM, I'm Brian Kelly.
I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for those meddling devil's advocates.
Welcome back to those meddling devil's advocates radio show. The 4 o'clock happy hour gets happier still, Dom. We got a fine guest joining us live via phone. He's Josh Kaul, Attorney General of the great state of Wisconsin. Josh, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you joining us, sir. My understanding, you were joined by a few legislative Democrats today, a new proposition put out there. And Josh, this would take an act of the legislature, but you're proposing civil rights enforcement legislation. Josh, what are you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, that's right. We announced legislation today that would give the Attorney General or a designee of the Attorney General the authority to bring certain cases that enforce our civil rights. When there's a pattern or practice of violations of our state or federal constitution or state laws relating to housing, employment, education, or public accommodations, or there's a violation that's of significant public importance. This would say that our AG can bring a case on behalf of Wisconsin to make sure that our civil rights are enforced.
Well, I'm glad you drew that distinction, Josh. I was thinking, when are you going to file suit against state Republicans? But sir, let's talk about my real questions. The disability aspect of this. I know State Rep Jimmy Anderson joined you for a presser earlier. Talk about this. Is it ADA compliance? Are there companies out there in the state of Wisconsin that are purposefully failing to accommodate or failing to hire? What is the current problem, Josh, trying to be solved in regards to the disabled?
Yeah, one of the applications of this would be that if there was a pattern where, for example, somebody who was renting out properties but was failing to provide appropriate accommodations to somebody with a disability and they were violating the housing laws by doing that, that's an example of where we would, under this bill, have the authority to bring an enforcement action. And as you mentioned, Representative Anderson, who has been an outspoken advocate for disability rights, as well as Disability Rights Wisconsin, spoke at the event today we had talking about this legislation and why it would help make a difference. And one of the reasons it would is that if you are somebody who has had your rights violated, often you're left in this difficult position of saying, do I go try to find a lawyer who will bring a case? You know, in some cases, you might have a group that would bring a lawsuit, a nonprofit group. But what we're asking for in this legislation is to say this is important enough that our state's Department of Justice should be playing a role in enforcement in this area, just like it does when there are consumer protection violations or environmental violations.
Attorney General Kaul, what about Senator LaTanya Johnson joined you at the press conference as well. I was less aware of discrimination against the disabled Wisconsinites, much more cognizant of the fact that there is discrimination going on the basis of race and ethnicity. Is there currently a state law that allows you to do anything predicated on ethnicity if people are being discriminatory, or are there no teeth in the current law, sir?
We have a limited ability right now to bring actions in certain cases. So if there's certain violations of housing laws, for example, we can bring an enforcement action. And we're often in a position to defend the rights of people. If the state is sued or if the federal government adopts a practice that we think is unconstitutional, we can, if we get authorization from the governor, bring a lawsuit. But we don't have the kind of broad authority to bring a civil action arguing that there's a pattern of discrimination or violations of the laws. There's some authority in DWD to bring actions in individual cases, but what we're asking for here would be much broader and would be a much stronger civil rights protection than we currently have.
Josh, are you thinking of individual actors, let's say an individual property management company that might be discriminatory in their practices? Are you more worried about broadly a community, a school district perhaps, that would have discriminatory practices going on that would necessitate an investigation and this legislation to create the means of that investigation. Where do you think this would come down, sir?
It would depend on what type of information that the Department of Justice received as it was, reviewing the facts out there. There's no particular type of case, or at least no single type of case that we necessarily are looking to go after with this. But what I will say is that a lot of states around the country have civil rights enforcement authority. In our release talking about this, we noted that Arizona, California, Delaware, DC, Florida, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and other states, Oklahoma, have civil rights enforcement authority. And it's been used in a variety of different ways in different cases. What this would do is first allow us to bring specific actions. You mentioned if you had a property owner, for example, that had a pattern of violating employment laws, this would allow a potential action to be brought. It also would allow us to deter those kinds of violations, because if people know that the state's Department of Justice could bring an enforcement action, that hopefully would make them less likely to violate these provisions. Because, if you just have these rights on paper, that's one thing. Having an entity that can actually make sure that those rights are enforced is what really makes them as strong as they can be.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Josh Kaul, the Attorney General from the great state of Wisconsin, joins us on the phone. Josh, thank you for doing so. This is proposed legislation per the press conference today. Josh, any feedback or input from Republicans or your friends on the other side of the aisle?
Not yet. This is a concept that hadn't been introduced in Wisconsin, certainly anytime recently, and I don't know if ever, but so we wanted to get this idea out there to start talking about why this is important and why it can make a difference. And our hope is to build support as we move forward here. One thing that's important to note, though, and this came up at the press conference we had today, is from one of the speakers, these really shouldn't be partisan issues. This is about enforcing the protections in our Constitution, both our federal Constitution and our state Constitution, and then some of the laws that we have in Wisconsin. And those aren't partisan issues. That's about making sure that our constitutional rights are protected.
Josh, I've got at least one more. Voting rights. How do voting rights factor into this? We know there have been some legislative efforts afoot to what I would perceive suppress voters here in the state of Wisconsin. We've seen rulings in the federal courts regarding gerrymandering that were ruled, either racially or ethnically discriminatory. Josh, would this legislation, if it passed and became law, would this allow you to investigate, or subsequent attorney generals to investigate motive or voting rights that come off as Jim Crow?
Yeah, it would depend on the facts of the case. There are certainly some cases where this would give authority to the AG to bring an enforcement action in the voting context. So if you had a pattern of conduct that violated the Constitution, if people were systematically being denied the right to vote, for example, because of the way that a particular clerk was administering an election, this would give the basis for an enforcement action and an investigation. Again, it would depend on the specifics, but there's that is one potential application, as is the protection of any other constitutional right.
Josh Kaul, the Attorney General, great state of Wisconsin, our guest for a few more minutes at least. Josh, let me ask you, Indigenous people here in the state of Wisconsin, obviously we've got a number of tribes and some differing legal relationships with those tribes due to reservation law and tribal law. Where do Indigenous people factor into this? And assuming this civil rights based investigatory legislation goes forward, sir, where do you see discrimination happening here in Wisconsin against Indigenous populations?
Well, that's another area where this legislation would be important. One of the people who joined us today as we were announcing this legislation is Shannon Holsey, who's both the president of the Stockbridge-Muncie community and also the Great Lakes Intertribal Council. And she spoke about, the ongoing systemic discrimination against indigenous people in Wisconsin, and the need to make sure that the rights we have, the civil rights that protect all of us, but including indigenous Wisconsinites, are enforced. And if there is systematic discrimination, pattern again, or practice of discrimination against indigenous communities, this would allow us to take action at the Wisconsin Department of Justice.
Josh, wanted to switch topics here briefly, if I may. Breaking news from the Wisconsin State Journal from Riley Vetterkind. Republican legislative leaders on Thursday called on Democratic Attorney General Josh Kaul, that's you, to join 13 other states in suing the federal government to allow states to use the latest influx of federal stimulus dollars to cut taxes. One quote from that the restriction, the latest stimulus restriction, that states may not reduce taxes, only raise them, is an unfair limitation on the sovereign authority of the states that acted responsibly and prudently during these trying times of this pandemic. So writes Voss and LeMahieu. Attorney General Josh Kaul, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, I haven't. We just received that letter this afternoon and haven't had a chance to review the precise issues they're raising and to address them directly. But we'll certainly take a look at that. What I can say is that this federal legislation is providing critical relief to families around the country, including in Wisconsin, and is going to do a lot of good for the state of Wisconsin, for our economy, and for people who've been struggling because of this pandemic. What I do think would be extraordinarily helpful for our legislators to do, and I hope our legislative leaders finally reconsider this, is to expand Medicaid in Wisconsin. It's sort of strange for them to be talking about missed opportunities to help our taxpayers out when there's $1.6 billion that we could save over the next couple of years by expanding Medicaid. And in the meantime, we could expand health insurance coverage to tens of thousands of additional Wisconsinites. So, I'd certainly prefer to see their focus there than on lawsuits, but we'll take a look and address the issue.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. But I guess just a little quick follow-up here, given your example of perhaps them moving forward on some Medicaid expansion, the $1.6 billion, even if they were to agree to that, they would not be able to take that money and use it for property tax relief, correct?
So under the current legislation that was passed under the Biden administration, there's a rule that relates to using the relief funds for tax cuts.
Sure.
Separately, under the ACA, we are using state dollars right now to cover a lot of Wisconsinites who could be covered with federal funds if we expanded Medicaid. And those are funds that could be used for tax cuts or for any other purpose, because those are state tax dollars. Our legislature is refusing to take that federal money. So there they could be saving resources that could clearly go to tax cuts.
Well, that seems like a lose-lose. Josh Kaul, our fine guest. Josh, want to give you any opportunity here before we're done. The comment on the lame duck lawsuit, the Wisconsin Supreme Court did not take it up. You still have to, involve the Joint Finance Committee in seeking settlements on behalf of the state, although that's never been the case in the past. Josh, are we done with this? Are you stuck? Where do we stand? 1 minute, sir.
Yeah, unfortunately, we still don't have a resolution. The state Supreme Court took up a case where they decided they wouldn't strike down the law in its entirety, the part of the law that we were challenging, because it could have some constitutional applications. And so we went back to the Supreme Court and said, well, let's just have you take this up immediately and consider some of those applications. And they said they didn't want to take it up directly. And that's consistent with a recent trend we've seen to try to step back from some of these original actions. But unfortunately, there are a lot of issues left to be resolved about how that plays out.
Attorney General of the great state of Wisconsin, Josh Kaul. Josh, thank you so much for coming around the Devil's Advocates today. We'll catch up real soon, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Josh. Come back. One last segment. Phone lines open. You better dial right now, 844-967-2789.
This is Pat Slattery of Slattery's Automotive Service in Verona. Established in 1973, I've been servicing and repairing cars in the Madison community for nearly 50 years. You can trust me to tell you what your car really needs and fix it right the first time. Give me a call at 608-848-6123 to schedule an appointment today. Slattery's Automotive Service, your trusted choice for local service and repairs for all your automotive needs.
We're 1 year into the COVID pandemic, and it's clear that we can't afford more obstruction from Republicans like Senator Ron Johnson. He's twice voted against COVID relief bills that would have helped struggling Wisconsin families. We can and we must provide people the relief they need to take care of their families. Together, we can create a better future. Text ACT to 668-366 to join Move On. Message and data rates may apply. MoveOn.org. Political action paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising. Poll.moveon.org. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
When you're trying to stay safe, you want the best protection possible. And when it comes to PPE, that means Lutema. Made in the USA with the highest quality materials, Lutema has mask sizes for all. Lutema masks pass ASTM Level 3 and NIOSH efficiency standards and come in a wide variety of colors and types, including M95i. Get your American-made face mask at Lutema.com. That's Lutema.com. And get 40% off your first purchase single item with promo code RADIO at Lutema.com.
Hey, Dom, is your carpeting starting to have a little bit of a funk to it?
That's a bit of a personal question, Crudy.
No, I know this is really busy time for one of our sponsors, Zero Res of Madison. People want a cleaner, healthier home.
You mean spending the entire quarantine locked in with bacteria and allergens isn't healthy? Who knew?
You want to get it professionally cleaned well before it gets funky. Even if you vacuum frequently,
I vacuum a lot.
You still need to get it professionally cleaned. Schedule your carpet cleaning online at ZeroResMadison.com. Tell them the Devil's Advocate sent you.
You're listening to Devil Radio 92.7 and WTTN 1580 AM. And that's pretty cool.
The Devil's Advocates, because freedom.
And we are back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Last segment of the day. So if you have something to say, pick up the phone, hit us up right now, toll free, 844-967-2789.
Dominic, want to thank our most recent guest, a fine one, Josh Kaul, the fine Attorney General, great state of Wisconsin. You know, when they first agreed to book him here, I thought perhaps he had to announce his reelective campaign. You know, there are some that would seek to replace Josh Kaul. So I thought maybe he'd be announcing his reelection or seeking higher office, maybe the U.S. Senate.
Ooh.
What do you think? Run, Josh, run. Can I offer an early endorsement? Trump did. The guy doesn't have to be running for anything for me to endorse him.
That's how they did it back in the old days. Now you can do whatever you want. No, appreciate Josh Kaul. I think it's, you know, there's a lot of holes to fill in that regard, the civil rights legislation, the ability for him to be involved and the Department of Justice to be involved. And I think it is hopefully, I think he's right. I think it is a bipartisan issue, and hopefully some Republicans will come along on it.
You, our fine audience, you still have a opportunity to participate, be a part of this show, but you got to dial now at 844-967-2789. Dom, found this over at the Urban Milwaukee Online Daily. Sean Johnson, our pal over at Wisconsin Public Radio, reports GOP lawmakers would ignore rules for stimulus money. At least they'd like to. GOP lawmakers forged ahead Wednesday with proposals to spend billions of dollars in federal COVID-19 recovery aid headed to Wisconsin, even as new nonpartisan analysis found some of their plans may run afoul of federal regulation. Guidelines. Run afoul. Wouldn't that ever stop them? You know that we are currently going to lose, on behalf of the poorest of Wisconsin families, like $55 million in the month of May. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court, you know, their timing impeccable. If they'd have dropped that resolution that, you know, you can't have mask mandates, and Tony Evers exceeded his constitutional authority, extending an emergency mandate. Well, the lack of emergency mandates costing state of Wisconsin SNAP recipients, the poorest of the poor, $55 million in AIDS right here in the month of May.
Wow.
And Republicans say, well, Tony can just, make a proposition. We'll just have an emergency, but only for the money. Anyways, back to their malfeasance, how they're trying to spend money that's not theirs to spend. I read from Sean Johnson. The move marked the latest schism between the legislative Republicans and Democratic Governor Tony Evers, who has the authority under current law to spend the money without consulting the legislature. Well, they didn't get to that in the lame duck, did they, Dom? The legislature's budget committee, with a lot of buddies on there, the budget committee passed a total of 11 bills Wednesday, each of them on 11-4 party line votes. While Evers is yet to say whether he'll sign or veto the plans, I can give you an insight.
I'll take that bet.
For the governor was sharply critical of the measures. Sharply critical.
Yeah.
Some of the bills called for spending federal money in place of state funding on ideas already included in the governor's budget, like replacing lead service lines and expanding broadband in Wisconsin. But others propose spending the recovery funds on paying down state debt or preventing a tax increase on employers to pay for the state's unemployment insurance fund. Ideas the nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Bureau indicated may not be permissible under the Federal American Rescue Plan Act. Well, that never stopped Scott Walker when he was killing the high-speed rail from thinking he was going to somehow backdoor that money into the highway funds.
I got a plan. We'll just take the money, not do the rail, and put that money towards roads. How's that work, federal government?
Well, it didn't work. They didn't give him the money.
No, and we paid a lot of money to walk away from that deal. Curdy, I'll jump in here. The Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu told members of the Budget Committee during the public hearing that the plans reflected the legislature's ideas for a ridiculous amount of money coming into Wisconsin. If that money's going to be spent, we need to make sure it's being spent as wisely as possible. Now, just note here, as wisely as possible. I mean, these are the wise Republicans that if they had their way, there would be $0 coming in to the state of Wisconsin.
And I would point out above and beyond that, Dom, they have cost us $3 billion in Medicaid money, and they will cost us $1.6 billion in additional Medicaid money that would expand Medicaid to more Wisconsinites that can't quite afford the federal exchanges. And above and beyond that, as was pointed out to us, within the hour, Dom, if they allowed the Medicaid dollars to come from the federal government, then we wouldn't have to use state tax dollars to backstop the expansion of Medicaid here in the state of Wisconsin. And theoretically, they could use those dollars to accomplish some of these goals.
Curdy,
in a physically prudent fashion instead of what they're proposing.
Right. Hey, what does Tom say? Republicans are bad for business.
They're bad at math.
Democrats described the plans as haphazard, saying they could force the state to repay federal funds in the name of scoring political points. The legislation's not real, said Senator John Erpenbach, a Democrat. Wisconsin state government is set to receive about $3.2 billion in discretionary funding under the latest federal law. The federal rules that cover the funding give governors the power to spend it. While Assembly Speaker Robin Vos had recently suggested lawmakers might sue the governor if he spends his funding without the legislature's approval, LeMahieu testified Wednesday that he had no such plans. I've not personally looked at suing the governor.
I wonder if Robin Vos could use some of those federal stimulus funds to hire lawyers to sue the governor so he could tell the governor how to spend those federal stimulus funds.
Or hire lawyers to sue the governor to use those funds to pay for their attorneys for the new redistricting.
Dominic, the U.S. Treasury has yet to hand down specific guidelines for the funds, but the federal government has said broadly what's allowable and what's forbidden. Oh, they want that forbidden fruit so badly, Dom. For example, the funds can be used to respond to the negative economic impacts of the coronavirus and make investments in water, sewer, broadband infrastructure. Is that infrastructure? But they can't be used for tax cuts, and it's unclear whether they can be spent on expenses not related to the pandemic. Not even legal fees to sue the governor? That's a shame. Thank you all for listening to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. We had some fine guests on the big program. They included, bear with me, Brendan Fischer, Federal Reform Program Director of the Campaign Legal Center, Joel Brennan, Secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Administration, and the fine Attorney General, great state of Wisconsin, Josh Kaul. Thank you all for listening. Stick around. Our buddy Earl Ingram's next. And then Native Roots Radio. It's coming live. Robert Pilot and Wendy. You know it. You love it. Keep listening. Double Radio.
This crowd has gone deadly silent. Cinderella story, out of nowhere. A former greenskeeper now about to become the Masters champion.
The mood of the crowd was positive and festive.
The crowd is standing on its feet here at Augusta. The normally reserved Augusta crowd going wild. Freedom!
Ted Cruz, go f yourself.
It looks like I'm a wreck. It's in the hole!
At Chaz Design Build, our tagline is building a better world, one remodeled home at a time. Simply stated, we want to be a part of the solution.